Snowflakes spiraled lazily across the battlements of Winterfell, whispering against old slate roofs and settling in soft white lattices upon stone worn smooth by 1,000 years of watchers on the wall. Jon Snow stood alone atop the eastern rampart, hair whipped into loose black ribbons by a cutting wind that smelled of pine and distant sleet. The courtyard below teemed with the quiet industry of a castle breathing again after war. Blacksmiths' hammers rang faintly, stable hands guided shaggy northern garrons to fresh straw, and the scent of broth and hot bread drifted from the kitchens in comforting plumes. Yet none of it reached Jon with warmth enough to loosen the knot behind his sternum. His gloved hands, scar-roughened, half-numb, rested on the glaive of weather-pocked stone. Beyond the walls, ghost prowled the fresh snow like a silent wraith, crimson eyes flicking toward the tree line where ravens perched, waiting on the cold. Footfalls soft as drifting ash sounded behind him. He did not turn. He knew the gate. Samwell Tarly had always trod with the caution of one who feared to split the earth with his weight. "Cold out here," Sam murmured, pulling his cloak tighter. "Colder than the walls some mornings." Jon said nothing, eyes fixed on the horizon where cloud banks bruised the sky. Sam's breath plumed between them before he gathered courage to speak again. "Bran is in the Godswood," Sam ventured, "and he's... well... he's waiting." Jon closed his eyes. Every road since the long night seemed to lead to the Godswood, to truths he would rather leave buried beneath ice. Still, the night had ended, light had dawned, and promises made in darkness clamored now for judgment in day. He pushed away from the parapet. They walked side by side past towers that whispered of childhood ghosts, past the great hall where Sansa's steady voice floated on the air directing stores, past men in black leather and northern wool, paying half-awed respect to the king in the north who might be something more. The heart tree awaited, its white bark luminous beneath dappled snow. Bran sat beneath its crimson leaves, the face carved in weirwood bleeding red sap like tears upon his shoulders. Arya perched on a gnarled root opposite him, sharpening needle with languid strokes. She glanced up as Jon entered, gray eyes piercing, measuring. Bran simply watched. "You're late," Arya said, but her smile flickered genuine for a heartbeat before vanishing behind the mask she'd learned far away in Braavos. Jon offered half a smile in reply. Sam lingered at the edge of the clearing, shifting from foot to foot. Bran's voice carried, soft yet resonant, as though the old gods themselves spoke through him. "It is time." Jon opened his mouth to protest. He had protested for weeks, but the words died unvoiced. He knelt instead, gloved hand pressed to winter-hard earth. The heart tree's face loomed above like some silent judge. "Tell me again," he whispered. Bran's eyes glazed white. Wind sighed through blood-red leaves as visions born of ravens and roots unfurled. The Tower of Joy bathed in dawnlight. Lyanna's labored breaths, the scent of blood on stone. Ned Stark face grave, lifting a swaddled babe with hair dark as his own. Whisper-thin promises, swords laid at a king's feet, oaths spoken, broken, reforged in shadow. Jon saw not merely pictures, but the ache between them. The heart pain of his father's lonely honor, the weight of a secret too vast to bear. When Bran's eyes cleared, silent snow drifted through still air. Jon rose on unsteady legs and found Arya watching. No pity lay in her gaze, only fierce loyalty, polished steel bright. "You are Aegon Targaryen," Bran said, voice human once more. "First of your name. The crown of the Conqueror is yours by birth." Arya sheathed needle with a soft click. "And the North will follow you, no matter what name you wear." Jon's laugh, dust dry, escaped before he could quell it. "Would they follow a dragon, Arya?" "They'll follow my brother," she answered. "And if they must bow to a dragon to do so, they'll learn." Sam cleared his throat. "The realm need not fear a dragon who keeps his father's honor. Robert's rebellion was built on a lie. The people deserve the truth." Jon's gaze drifted skyward where the snow fell thicker, each flake shining silver as moon-kissed scales. Far to the south, Dragons soared above blackened towers, and one woman waited with a war's worth of love and rage burning behind her violet eyes. To claim his name would set banners aflame from Dorne to the wall. Yet the truth was a tide that could not be held back. He felt it already in the wary deference of northern lords, in the hush that fell when he passed. Secrets lived, once spoken. They burrowed in every hall and hearth until none could recall a time before them. "A king needs allies," Arya said suddenly, breaking the silence. "One's not born of dragons." Jon arched a brow. "Spoken like our sister, the Lady of Winterfell." Arya shrugged. "Spoken like someone who spent enough nights sleeping in a stable loft to know who keeps the food moving. Baratheon blood still carries weight south of the neck. And Gendry." She paused, cheeks flushing a shade deeper than winter wind alone could cause. "Is loyal. Stubborn as a mule, but loyal." Bran's lips curved the faintest fraction. House Baratheon forged the first royal alliance with the Targaryens on Dragonstone. History bends in circles. Jon considered Arya, wolf quick, knife sharp, wild. Gendry's name conjured a blacksmith's laugh, and sinewy arms swinging a hammer with easy grace. He remembered them on the lone road north of Eastwatch, shoulders brushing, hearts beating in time beneath drumming hooves. "Would you have it so?" he asked her. Arya met his gaze without flinching. "I choose my own path, but sometimes paths cross for a reason." Snow crunched. Sansa stepped into the clearing, auburn hair loose upon her furs. "We gather the bannermen at dawn." She announced, voice carrying steel. "Winterfell must hear the truth from your lips." She faced Jon, blue eyes unwavering. "Whatever crown you wear, you remain our brother. But politics are a blade honed on timing." Jon inclined his head. He loved her for the caution she carried, forged in the courts of monsters. He feared the storm his name would raise over her careful walls. Dawn bled pale across Winterfell's great hall, yet torches flickered along timber beams like beacons in the hush. Lords and ladies filled the benches, Manderleys in sea-green wool, Karstarks in black and silver, Glover, Hornwood, Lady Lyanna Mormont, fierce as a cornered lynx. Davos Seaworth stood at Jon's right, good hand resting on his sword belt. Sam faced the assembly with eyes wide as moons, but voice steady as he read Maester Aemon's faded parchments, cross-checked lineages, the red silk of Rhaegar's annulment, writ beneath the Challenger's own seal. Murmurs rose, fell. Doubt flickered like shadows. Then Bran spoke, and the hall stilled as though struck by a thunderclap. Few understood Greenside, but none doubted the boy who moved ravens with a thought and unmasked the Night King's steps. When Jon stepped forward, silence throbbed. "I was born beneath a shattered tower," he began, voice low but resonant. "To Lyanna Stark and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. I have carried my father's name with pride, but I will not shame the man who raised me by spurning the truth he died to keep." A hush followed like the hush before a gale. Lady Lyanna rose first. "Names do not change courage," she declared in her bell-bright voice. "You bled for the North. We follow you still." Others followed. Glover slammed his fist to his chest. Manderley bowed, jowls quivering. The Karstarks raised torches in salute. And Jon felt the old granite keep pulse around him, a living heart answering his call. Yet for every nod, he sensed the shadow of Daenerys storm-born across their faces, dragonfire looming over Northmen's roofs. His claim set them on a collision course with the queen he had bent the knee to save. But he would not bend twice, nor break the realm upon a question of crowns. News rode south on raven wings. At first light 2 mornings hence, Jon stood in the yard seeing Gendry off toward Storm's End with 6 riders at his back. The blacksmith had received the formal parchment, an offer of betrothal from the king in the north who bore the blood of old Valyria. Eyes wide, he'd knelt until Arya kicked his shin and hauled him upright. "Don't bend," she hissed. "We fought beside each other, nearly died together. If I wanted someone groveling, I'd marry a Frey." "Nan." Gendry's grin split his face, broad and sheepish. "Can't have that." Freys make piss-poor husbands. He offered Jon a bow tempered by good humor. Your Grace. Jon clasped his forearm. Ride swift. Storms end Hunt's Europe corridors for Draug, but there's little in the Stormlands save wind and rumor now. Your home waits to be reclaimed. Gendry's breath caught. He'd spoken little of heritage, content to hammer swords for others, but the Baratheon blood ran deep in his stride as he mounted up. Arya stood beside Jon, arms folded. Gendry's gaze lingered, a silent promise. Then hooves clattered past the gate, disappearing into falling snow. Arya exhaled, shoulders dropping. Jon watched her, seeing not the tiny girl who once chased cats, but a woman forged in death's shadow. You'll ride after him soon enough, he said. Soon as Sansa stops measuring me for gowns, he muttered. Jon laughed for the first time in days. Dragons came with the thaw. The first roar reached Winterfell as a distant tremor, deep, unfurling, older than language. Jon strode to the battlements to find Drogon's vast silhouette carving through cloud, his wings blotting the sun, Rhaegal close behind. Snow melted in swirling eddies beneath the furnace of their breath. They alighted beyond the walls, talons carving trenches in hoarfrost. Dany rode Drogon's neck, silver hair streaming, eyes like blown violet glass locked on Jon. He descended the steps to meet her, every heart in Winterfell beating in his chest. They halted an arm's length apart. Your ravens fly quickly, she said, voice soft as razor wire. Truth travels faster. Truth? Her gaze flicked to the rows of stark banners snapping above the ramparts, to the crimson and black standard unfurled alongside them. Three-headed dragon beside direwolf. Or ambition. He flinched. I never wanted crowns. But you wear one now. She reached, fingers brushing the circlet of dark steel and jet, forged at dawn by Winterfell's smiths in the style of Aegon's conquest crown. It hissed beneath her touch, as though disagreeing with being so lightly equated. Jon caught her wrist, gentle. I wear it for all of us. The realm cannot survive another war for a throne, but it may endure if two dragons rule as one. Then thou. She searched his face. Snow swirled and melted on their cloaks. You would wed me then, as cousins once did. To unite dragon and wolf? He remembered the taste of her lips beneath the crackling canvas of a ship racing north. The warmth of her skin in the chill of the wall's shadow. But he tasted ashes too, kingdoms burned for lesser loves. I would stand beside you, he said, but I will not hide who I am, or what the people will call me. Bitterness flashed. And what of Arya's match? A Baratheon forging an alliance for your claim, an anvil of promises hammered while I flew south to rally the Reach. You spoke of honesty. Man? He closed his eyes. Gendry would follow you to the end of the world. He always will. This betrothal binds more than a crown. It binds old wounds. Her chest rose, fell. A silent battle waged behind her eyes. Rhaegal rumbled. Scales shimmering emerald beneath winter sun. Ghost padded from behind Jon, hackles raised. Yet he halted at Jon's side with a soft growl that held no malice. Finally she whispered, There's a road where we both walk, but it leads across fire. Then we walk through fire, he answered. Councils stretched into night. Sansa weighed raven reports. Davos pored over grain stores. Tyrion arrived 2 days later with news of lords in the Reach pledging to House Targaryen. Wary yet unwilling to oppose dragons. Yet cracks splintered. Some saw in Jon a chance to curb Daenerys' wrath. Others whispered of divided loyalties. Jon spent sleepless hours pacing the godswood, knuckles white. He felt the tug of ghosts, the oath Ned had carried, the hush of Lyanna's dying wish, the laughter of children playing in the crypts long before winter came. Every step forward felt betrayal to someone he loved. Arya returned the evening of a pink sunset, cheeks flushed from sparring. She found Jon in Ned's old solar, studying a map of Westeros dotted with flickering candles. Sansa wants you in the hall, she said. She's cornered our southern friends. He followed to find Sansa seated at the long table. Across from her stood Jon Royce and Lord Tarly, eyes wary. Tyrion leaned against a pillar, face unreadable. Sansa rose. "The lords ask to know your intentions regarding the Iron Throne," she said, voice calm. "And whether the North remains sovereign." Jon met their stares. The Seven Kingdoms bled for division. "We stand at a crossing. Will we cling to old wounds, or will we build something better?" Lord Tarly's mouth tightened. "My house bent the knee to Queen Daenerys. Your claim sets banners against banners once more. And if claim joins claim," Jon countered. "If dragon marries dragon, wolf marries hammer. Do you still see war in that union? Or peace?" "No." Royce hesitated, bold brow furrowed. "Peace lies in justice. Robert's war began for a fostered boy and a stolen maiden. If their son sits the throne with the woman you love at his side, perhaps the gods will find that balance enough." Silence stretched. Sansa exhaled. Tyrion's eyes glinted. Winter's grip loosened by increments. Ravens flew. Oaths returned on parchment, sealed in wax. The Arryn falcon, the Tyrell rose reborn in Tarly hands. The Martell spear touched with sun. Few dared defy two dragons, and a northern army bolstered by Vale Knights. Fewer still after word spread of Arya Stark's engagement. Wolf and stag joined in mutual respect. Legends of Nymeria and Mors Martell echoing across the centuries. Gendry returned to Winterfell in early spring, riding beneath a new banner. A crowned stag rampant within a field of Baratheon gold, lugged by Storm's Endmen, hard-pressed but loyal. At his side rode Edric Storm, long thought dead, returned from exile to lend weight to House Baratheon's rebirth. Arya met them at the gate, smile crooked as a fox's grin. Snow melted beneath their boots. Jon watched, half-smile tugging as Arya led Gendry to the glass gardens, vines already budding under melted drifts. Gendry's hand brushed hers in passing. The gesture spoke of thousands of unspoken fears, eased by a single touch. Jon turned away, hope stirring. That night, the great hall roared with feast. Venison glazed in honey, trenchers steamed, horns of ale passed. Musicians plucked soft chords. Jon sat beside Daenerys at the high table. Her hand found his beneath the board, fingers lacing. For a moment, he let himself believe. But shadows crept at the edges. News of Cersei's armies consolidating in the west. Euron Greyjoy hunting lanes off Fair Isle. Golden Company mercenaries wandering parentless, now that their queen lay dead beneath rubble of King's Landing. Tyrion whispered of opportunists ready to test dragon metal. The realm still bled. Moonlight streamed through high windows, as Jon stood alone in the crypts. Candles flickering along the carved faces of Starks, long gone. Lyanna's effigy rested beneath a thin sheen of melted frost. Jon traced the stone roses in her lap, heart heavy with all she had given, all he threatened to squander in pursuit of peace. Footsteps echoed. Daenerys appeared, cloak drawn tight. She paused beside the statue of Eddard Stark, eyes lingering on the sword across his knees, the Stark resolve in stone. "Your father loved fiercely," she said quietly. Jon's throat thickened. "He died for honor few understood. Yes, ours may." She turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I came to Westeros to break the wheel, tear down the power that crushes those with no name. But I find myself bound to crowns again. And I find myself bound to fire," he answered, stepping closer. "We cannot choose our parents, only what we do with their legacies." She searched him. He intertwined their fingers. "Let us forge something new from the ashes." Her lips brushed his. Soft, uncertain, as though the ghosts watched. And perhaps they did. But beneath their witness, dragon and wolf chose unity over ruin. Over the coming weeks, ravens bore summits to be held at Riverrun. Neutral ground between North and Reach, riverlords anxious to rebuild. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, and Tyrion would ride with a retinue of Northmen, and unsullied, leaving Winterfell in Bran's sight and Arya's silent watch. Gendry departed first, carrying messages to Storm's End and forging new steel in anticipation of wars they hoped never to fight. The night before departure, Jon stood in the courtyard. Arya drifted from shadows, needle at her hip. "Leaving the north again, brother?" "Only for a time. Bran will keep an eye on things." "Literally." He smiled. She huffed. "He sees everything, except when I steal his sweets." The jest faded. Jon laid a hand on her shoulder. "If we fail, keep Gendry safe. Keep our people safe." She touched his gloved fingers, expression softening. "We're wolves. We keep each other." Moonlight glimmered on the courtyard stones as Arya stepped back, unsheathed needle, and saluted him with the slender blade. Jon drew Longclaw in answer. Steel kissed steel, a silent pact. In the stables, Rhaegal lowered his great emerald head for Jon to scratch beneath a scale. Drogon rumbled as Daenerys murmured Valyrian endearments. The road ahead would test kingdoms and love alike. But for the moment, beneath a sky pricked with cold stars, two dragons, a wolf and a pack of loyal hearts, turned south, not to conquer, but to mend a realm torn by lies. Dawn the next day set a river of gold across the snows as hooves and clawed feet left Winterfell's gates. Jon glanced back once. The wall stood tall, ancient as the first men, stubborn as all Starks. He thought of a crown wrought in dragonsteel waiting on his brow, of Arya forging her own fate beside a hammer-wielding stag, of Sansa's quiet resolve, of Bran's sight soaring with ravens overhead. Ahead, the King's Road unrolled like a gray ribbon toward destiny. Jon set his heels to Rhaegal's flank, felt the surge of muscle and wind as the dragon leapt skyward. Drogon followed, a shadow blotting out the sun, Daenerys' hair blazing silver in its light. Beneath their wings, the north rode south, banners snapping, a direwolf crowned with flame, and within its jaws the promise of a future unshackled from the hate of fathers. And those storm clouds massed on the horizon. For the first time since the long night, Jon felt the warmth of new dawn burn true upon his face. "Ah, Kai. Kai." Soft spring rain pattered over the King's Road, turning the ruts to thin ribbons of mud that clung to hooves and boots alike. Rhaegal and Drogon wheeled overhead, their vast shapes little more than charcoal smudges against a sky the color of hammered pewter. The wing's distant thunder kept would-be highwaymen far from the column, yet most eyes still swept the hedgerows in wary cadence. Peace was a rumor here, as fragile as the shafts of wisteria, trembling on new vines. Jon rode near the van, Longclaw slung at his hip, cloak drawn against the damp. Ghost loped a pace ahead, white coat streaked with brown from the road, ears flicking toward every broken branch. The direwolf's steady presence slowed Jon's restless thoughts, but only a little. Daenerys rode beside him on a sleek gray gelding from the Vale, her dragon bone cloak clasp glimmering where droplets gathered. She kept her gaze forward, lips parted as if tasting the wet wind for portents. Now and again Rhaegal circled, emerald eyes fixing on her with quiet devotion before he soared back through layers of cloud. Drogon's silhouette remained farther west, a black dagger tracing the foothills, yet Jon felt the hum of the great beast's vigilance even at this distance. A constant wordless question. "Are you safe?" Behind them, the procession stretched long. Unsullied marched in phalanx, spears upright, the rain sliding down polished shafts. Northern men in shaggy cloaks strode with pikes or rode shag-maned horses, iron rings clinking in steady rhythm. Vale knights glittered in silvered mail, falcon pennants damp but resolute. Somewhere near the middle trotted Samwell atop a sturdy palfrey, consulting a leather-bound ledger already dotted with rain spots. Beside him, Missandei translated softly to a young scribe from White Harbor who recorded supply allotments in neat, slanted script. Gendry's Baratheon men, newly equipped with black and gold tabards, guarded the wagon bearing Stormland's steel. Barrels of hammers and spearheads forged in Storm's End's reborn forges. Sansa rode close to the center, blue hood drawn low, conversing with Davos and Brienne. She kept a small parchment map rolled tight in her gloved hand, annotated with the sigils and dispositions of lords invited to River Run, and those who had not yet answered the call. Her eyes flint bright, missed little. The first true test came 5 days south of Moat Cailin, where the King's Road crossed the swift-flowing Green Fork. The wooden bridge had been stripped of planks. Blackened supports jutted like broken ribs above the torrent. Flotsam of burned wagons and half-sunken shields eddied in the froth. Jon dismounted, surveying the wreckage. Davos knelt, fingers tracing charred timber. Set a fire not 2 days past, he judged, sniffing the smoke-soaked grain. Torch oil most like. Sansa frowned. Who gains by slowing us here? The Freys are gone. Tyrion peered across the river, rain dripping from his hood. Whoever it is, they misjudge us. A broken bridge delays us, not defeats us. He turned to Daenerys. May I borrow a dragon? Daenerys arched a pale brow. Borrow? Tyrion spread his hands. One pass of Drogon's wings could ferry ropes across or melt new piers from the riverbank. But I fear a greater game. Burning the bridge was a message, not a barricade. Someone wishes to show the realm that the Dragon King and Wolf Queen cannot keep roads safe. Nation. Jon's jaw tightened. We answer them then. Swiftly and without mercy. Daenerys' gaze lingered on the far tree line. Let us first find whose banner hides behind these ashes. The scouts discovered the bodies by dusk. 3 Westerland's outriders, cloaks singed, throats cut with precise slices. Their armor bore no sigil, yet hidden beneath one hauberk lay a strip of crimson cloth embroidered with a golden lion, torn deliberately from a banner. Sansa studied the scrap by torchlight. Not all Lannisters died with Cersei. The rock still stands, Davos reminded. Kevan's youngest and many cousins fled during the sack. Enough gold left to hire killers. Tyrion turned the blood-stiff cloth between thumb and forefinger. His eyes, usually quick with sardonic light, now shone only with sorrow. My family was a fire, he murmured. It burns on long after the house has fallen to embers. Daenerys squeezed his shoulder. Fires can be quenched. Not without smoke, he said, letting the scrap fall. Repairs began at dawn. Under Davos' direction, Northmen felled tall ash trees from the river's edge and hewed makeshift beams. Baratheon smiths hammered iron spikes, while Unsullied drove them into newly carved joints. Drogon passed overhead once, molten breath searing damp planks to cure them hard as kiln-fired oak. Within a day, a narrow pedestrian causeway spanned the Green Fork, enough for troops to cross 2 abreast, and for horses to wade shallow downstream, where engineers had anchored guide ropes. By sunset of the second day, the column moved again. 3 nights beyond the river, the column made camp in a meadow sheltered by tall birches. Rain had ceased, and stars glittered between scudding clouds. Jon sat by a small fire, nursing a tin cup of mulled wine spiced with clove. Gendry approached, long hammer slung across his back. Steam rising from sweat-damp hair. He sank onto a log beside Jon, massaging calloused palms. How many spears forged today? Jon asked. 43. Gendry grinned, teeth bright in firelight. And 24 mail patches for the Unsullied. Those lads wear their armor like second skin. But even leather needs mending. Jon chuckled. You sound more lordly each day. Gendry's grin faded, replaced by rueful earnestness. I'm no Lord Jon. Never will be. A pause, then softer. But I'll make a good sword for her. Jon followed his gaze across the camp, where Arya sparred with Grey Worm beneath lantern glow, wooden sticks clacking in rapid cadence. Her hair, grown longer, whipped in inky arcs. Every strike flowed like water. Sweat glimmered on her brow, but her smile was exhilaration distilled. She'll cut her own path, Jon said. Just be sure to keep pace. Gendry exhaled, eyes shining with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Gods help me. Thou. River Run's red sandstone towers rose from mist 2 weeks later. Banners snapped taut on a chill breeze. The silver trout of Tully, the direwolf of Stark, the crowned dragon of Targaryen, the crowned stag of Baratheon newly sewn on cloth, still creased from storm's end. Water from the tumblestone lapped at the castle's foundations. The twins' destruction upstream had left debris snared among reed beds, but the river flowed strong, ready to bear commerce again. Edmure Tully greeted the procession atop the drawbridge, grayer than last Jon had seen him, yet eyes clear. Beside him stood his lady wife Rosalind, hands folded, and their boy Mark, clutching his grandfather's trout-embroidered cloak to keep it from dragging. Edmure bowed deep to Jon and Daenerys. "Welcome to River Run, your graces. It has been too long since this hall hosted kings without siege." Jon clasped his uncle's arm. "May it be the first of many peaceful councils." Daenerys inclined her head in courtly grace. "Thank you, Lord Edmure. Old wounds bleed longest. Let tonight set balm upon them." Within the great hall, fresh rushes smelled of mint and lavender. A long dais bore seats for each delegation. Sansa settled between Jon and Tyrion, ink-black quill tucked behind one ear. Daenerys sat at Jon's right, purple eyes scanning entrance. Bronze Jean Royce for the Vale, Lady Madge Mormont representing Bear Island, Lord Tarly of Horn Hill, come with his son Dickon, Sir Addison Hill, bastard envoys from the Reach, Prince Quentyn Martell, newly returned from exile in Lys, and 2 cautious Ironborn captains from House Harlaw, seeking trade in place of reaving. Conspicuously absent were the Westerland's cousins, Lannisters unaccounted for, and any word from Pike, though ravens were rumored to circle over Euron's silence off Fair Isle. After courtesies, Tyrion rose, scroll in hand. "We assemble to forge a charter," he announced, voice carrying beneath vaulted rafters. "Not a crown forged of steel alone, but of oaths that bind dragons, wolves, stags, krakens, roses and sun spears alike. A realm where grievance may speak before it draws sword." He unrolled parchment. The proposed Accords of River Run, draft the first. Eyes tracked each clause. Succession to be ratified by Great Council majority, in case the ruling monarchs left no heirs. Local lordships to retain levy rights yet, pledge unified defense. Trade tariffs reduced between North and Reach to ensure grain flows. Dragonstone to serve as neutral archive for royal decrees, overseen by... Debate raged for hours. Lord Tarly argued tariffs too low. Meg Mormont demanded oversight on Vale levies crossing Stark lands. Quentyn Martell insisted on codifying protection for bastard inheritance. The Ironborn captains sought guarantee they could rebuild fleets without immediate suspicion. Voices rose, plates of cold trout congealed. Torches burned low. Daenerys listened, speaking rarely, but when she did, even Royce leaned in. Near dawn, when only 2 candles remained, Sansa tapped her quill on the oak. "Set aside coin," she said crisply. "What we draft tonight is bone. Flesh may change, but bones endure." She faced Lord Tarly. "You bargain grain yet ignore roads ravaged from the war. Lower tariffs spur trade enough to fill your coffers thrice what you lose at gatehouses." She turned to Madge. "Bear Island's levy crosses the neck by river. You know the North's watchwords. We guard our own. Vale Knights ride roads we protect. Set garrison numbers proportionate to road length and share cost." She faced Quentyn. "Bastards held hostage by name alone bleed the realm of talent. Inheritance shall be left to each lord's decree, but cannot bar them from council or office." "Then Hell," Royce smirked. "Lady of Winterfell indeed." Murmurs of assent rippled. Sansa dipped her pen and amended clauses long into the gray dawn. The summit adjourned to rest after 3 days. The charter provisional, but promising. Yet on the 4th night, the enemy burned their signal. It began with a low thrumming beyond the ramparts. Jon stood on a parapet, tracing constellations when Ghost stiffened, lips curling. A drumbeat of hooves on sodden earth rose from the fog-shrouded western fields. Torches flared crimson out of the haze, dozens at first, then scores, riding abreast like a mobile dawn. A horn blast, long, mournful. Then another. The castle roused. Men scrambled to arms. Daenerys emerged onto the wall buckling dragon-scale cuirass. "Scouts!" she demanded. "Who rides?" A Northman pressed a far eye to his cheek. cheeks paling. "Red Lion, my queen." Westerland's banner quartered with a manticore. Jon's stomach dropped. Sir Forley Prester's sigil, a minor cousin to Lannister's, but he would not muster alone. "Sound the alarms." Bells clanged. Unsullied formed shield walls at the gatehouse. Stark archers lined merlons. Vale scorpions cranked bolts the size of saplings. Above, Drogon's silhouette banked, Rhaegal chasing. A shout rang from the courtyard. Arya vaulting stairs 3 at a time, black leathers gleaming. Gendry followed, hammer in hand. Sansa took position beside Maester Walken near the inner ward, distributing dragonglass arrowheads, relics of a war just past yet still potent. On the western field, formation parted. A lone rider advanced beneath crimson banner. He reined in, voice booming through a voice horn. "King in the north, behold the vengeance of House Lannister. The debts of fire and blood come due." Tyrion stepped onto the battlements beside Jon, face drained. "Prester never lacked flair," he muttered, "but he seldom acts without coin." Jon signaled archers to hold. "What terms?" he called down. Prester's laugh was harsh. "Terms? You steal our crown, wed our dragons, beggar the rock. No terms." He raised a gloved fist. Torches along his front rank arced into darkness, not oil-soaked brands, but small clay casks that shattered on landing. Fires burst green, wildfire licking mud, hissing rain to steam. Soldiers in bronze half-plate dragged Seeger rams from the mist. Dany's breath caught. They mean to burn the walls, not breach them. Wildfire beneath buttresses could crack the keep. Jon looked skyward. "Drogon." She closed her eyes, whispering Valyrian. A roar split cloud as Drogon plunged like black lightning, wings cupping air in titanic strokes. Flame erupted, incandescent gold, engulfing the front rank. Wildfire burst, green feeding on orange, becoming a searing sun that blinded friend and foe alike. Soldiers screamed as armor warped. Yet wildfire was fickle. As Drogon strafed, pockets of the alchemical flame ignited air currents, sending fountains of emerald updraft licking at the dragon's ventral scales. Drogon roared in pain, angling skyward. Dany clutched the rigging behind his neck, yelling to steady him. Meanwhile, Prester's second wave advanced behind shields painted wet with limewash to resist flame. Scorpions thudded bolts upward, one clipping Rhaegal's wing membrane. The green dragon faltered, screeched, and Jon's heart stuttered. "Open the riverside postern," he ordered Davos. "We flank." Clad in half-plate, Jon mounted his black courser, ghost pacing snarls at his side. Gendry rallied Baratheon spearmen. Arya darted along parapets toward the gate pulley chain. The postern groaned. 100 northern outriders burst out, cutting toward the besiegers' flank where supply wagons waited behind minimal guard. Ghost bounded ahead, white death in the night. Jon's sword flashed as he carved through a gold-plated shield, rider toppling. Rain of ash fell from wildfire plumes. Sparks hissed in mud. Below the walls, Vale knights under Jon Royce thundered straight at the siege engine. Wings of lances angled. They slammed Prester's left like a storm tide, splintering pikes. Horses screamed, men tumbled, mud churned. A brutal ballet lit by green hellfire. On the ramparts, Arya crouched atop a merlon, needle in hand, eyes tracking commanders. She spotted a tall man with lion helm issuing signals via torch. In one fluid motion, she leapt, slid down a catwalk, raced along the wall, and dropped into shadows behind the Westerlands commander's picket. Needle's point kissed the chain of his gorget. His orders died in a wet gargle. Arya vanished before alarm rang. Wildfire's fury began to consume itself. Lacking enough accelerant, the emerald swaths burned out on soaked earth, leaving only blackened trenches. Drogon returned, flame once more pure crimson. His roar shook broken lines. Panic spread. Prester fought to rally, but his voice lost to the cacophony. Jon pressed forward, Longclaw finding gaps in gilded mail. Ghost hamstrung a rider's horse, bringing man hard to ground. Davos' sword glinted in torchlight. The Onion Knight's smile grim. Stormlanders crashed the rear of the train. Gendry's hammer dented helms like skins of wine. Prester realized too late he faced annihilation. With a curse he spurred away. But an arrow, stark fletching black and white, caught him behind the knee. He toppled, screaming. Tyrion appeared, crossbow in hand, expression carved from granite. He approached the fallen lion, quarrel still vibrating. Prester spat blood, reached for dagger. Tyrion placed boot on his wrist. "You believed my family coin could still buy kingdoms," Tyrion said. "It buys only graves." He fired a second bolt through Prester's eye. Silence swallowed the western field, save for crackle of dying fires. Dawn spread sullen pink across charred meadow. Healers moved among moaning shapes. Unsullied methodically dispatched wildfire-seared corpses to prevent reignition. Rhaegal perched atop a bluff. Injured wing folded gingerly. Maesters studied the membrane, applying salves. Daenerys stroked his neck, murmuring soft prayers. Drogon rested beside her, gaze wary, as if ashamed he could not protect his brother. Jon met Sansa, Tyrion, and Davos in the solar above River Run's gate tower. High enough that dawn's light cast long bars across the blood-streaked armor, still buckled to their shoulders. Jon spoke first. This was no random raid. Wildfire casks require Masters of the Guildhall or pyromancers of King's Landing. Someone funds them. Tyrion nodded. Prester held little fortune. But the Golden Company remnants still number thousands. Sellswords who lost pay when Cersei fell. Someone promising them gold, equal to a Lannister's? "Hey, Euron Greyjoy," Davos growled. "He sacks Planky Town. He extorts from Old Town. He sells silks from Volantis for thrice the price. And Lannister cousins, desperate for crowns, would cling to any devil." Sansa tapped a parchment sealed in black wax delivered hours after the battle. A raven reached the castle even as Prester advanced. She broke the seal. Inside were 3 words, written in fresh blood. "Fire feeds fire." Jon's jaw worked. "A threat." "A promise," Sansa corrected. "They intend to bleed us with wildfire until the realm burns again. They cannot match Dragonflame, so they imitate it, tainting the name." Tyrion paced, cloak whispering. "Then we must cut the head before it strikes." Harrenhal stands empty since the Night King's march burned its garrison. If the Golden Company seeks central ground, cracked towers and old forges offer refuge. He faced Jon. "Give me a host, I'll smoke the rats from their nest." Jon shook his head. "We split our strength, we invite divisions. The charter is not yet ratified. War now fractures trust." Davos folded arms. "Yet if we sit, wildfire comes to River Run again. Or Winterfell next." Sansa's blue eyes pinned Jon. "Choose swift. Peace delays but war decides." He turned to the window. Below, soldiers dismantled siege rams, tossing charred fragments into river barges to sink beneath the tumblestone. Gray smoke ascended like morning veils. Jon thought of Bran's distant eyes, of Arya's restless bladesmith betrothed, of Daenerys' bloodlines scarring the sky in emerald flame. Choices. Always choices. He faced them. "We hunt the pyromancer's supply. Tyrion, you ride with a vanguard. Unsullied spears, Vale Knights, the Baratheon smith host. Cut their forges, free any forced alchemists. Sansa remains to solidify the charter, finalize coin levies for roads and river patrols. Davos commands river defense until Tyrion's return. I ride with Daenerys northward." "North?" Sansa blinked. "The Erie's larders brim from harvests spared by war." Jon explained. "Royce Falcon Knights guard the Vale, but Aerie forges produce steel fit for dragon scales. We'll ask Lord Rober for ore tithes and smiths." Tyrion arched a brow. 2 dragons descending on the Erie. That will loosen more than ore. "Let them. Fear may keep opportunists at bay while we mend." Plans settled. They parted. Jon descended to the courtyard where Rhaegal dozed. Maester Walken nodded, satisfied with binding along the dragon's torn wing edge. Daenerys greeted Jon, eyes ringed by sleeplessness yet alight with iron. "He'll fly soon," she said. "But not today." Then we ride, Jon answered. Arya found Gendry beside the tumblestone smithing hammers to salvage. Sparks flew as he beat red-hot iron against anvil. She watched, fascinated by the strength coiled in his shoulders, the rhythm like heartbeat. "You leave with Tyrion." He startled, turned, wiping sweat. Going to smoke out pyromancers." "Sounds merry." She approached, fingers tracing the grooves of his hammer haft. "Try not to get blown apart." He grinned. "I'll duck." She smacked his chest lightly. "Duck faster than wildfire." A pause. "I have something." She produced a small packet from her belt. 3 vials of thick blue liquid. "Alchemist's fire?" he guessed. "Dust shade," she corrected. "Slows the heart. A few drops on a blade can still a guard without killing. Don't ask where I procured it." "Bauer," he accepted gravely. Their eyes met, words unneeded. He pressed a rough kiss to her brow. "When I return, we'll test the new oak practice yard. First to yield cook's supper." "I never yield," she whispered. "Then I'll starve happy." He laughed, swung the hammer to rest on his shoulder and strode toward the waiting column. Arya watched until the last Baratheon banner vanished around a bend, heart twisting in unfamiliar ways. She palmed Needle's hilt for comfort, then breathed deep. Work remained. 7 days later, Jon and Daenerys crested the high road toward the Eyrie. Their escort a tapestry of colors: Stark direwolf, Targaryen dragon, Arryn falcon, and the sun spear of distant Dorne, whose envoys caught up eager to witness dragonflight in mountains seldom touched by wings. The sun cut through alpine air like clear wine, sharpening the world's edges. Crags jagged as broken spears, goat tracks like silver veins. Snow still clung to shadowed ravines, though wildflowers peaked where meltwater danced. As they neared the stone, a horn announced them. Gates opened. The mountain fortress emerged like a white jewel set against cobalt. Lord Robar Royce, temporary castellan for young Lord Robert Arryn, late traveling in Old Town for health, greeted them with formal courtesy but wary eyes. "We come as friends," Jon declared. "The North rides for peace, and dragons guard our sky, not seek to conquer." Royce bowed, plates clinking. "The Vale stands with Winterfell. And with Dragonstone." He added quickly at Daenerys' nod. "We mined ample silver and iron this past season. Our forges will shape what you need, though our smiths claim dragonsteel, a craft lost to Valyria." "Menno Sam." "They'll learn," Daenerys assured. "Fire makes new masters." Feasts followed, modest by southern measure but rich with goat cheese, trout baked with juniper berries, cloudberry tarts. Over tables carved from weirwood long ago, brought as bride gift, Jon and Robar spoke of ore quotas, sending mule trains south escorted by Vale archers. Daenerys conversed with the eldest smith, a woman named Mera, who proposed forging riveted scale from high-carbon alloy mixed with trace dragon glass. Dany smiled. Innovation born of necessity, something Essos smiths forgot chasing gold. Atop the Moondoor balcony, Jon and Dany later stood under swirls of starlight. Valleys below fell away into velvet blackness pricked by torch dots at shepherd huts. The air chilled breath to mist. "Do you think it can hold?" she asked. "The realm's fragile as spun glass." He took her hand. "Glass can be tempered with flame, or shatter," she whispered. He kissed her knuckles. "We'll guard against shatter." A crash of wings echoed. Rhaegal landed on a lower turret, rumbling greeting. His bandaged wing glowed faint emerald in moonshine. Dany smiled. "Heals. Ace will the realm," Jon said. Far south, Tyrion's vanguard reached the smoking ruin of salt pans, flattened by ironborn reavers months before. Unsullied scouts located fresh wildfire barrels hidden in collapsed cellars, green hue leaking through cracked clay. Pyromancer sigils etched in Valyrian glyphs, decorated stoppers. Tyrion studied them beneath lanterns. "Not stolen from King's Landing stock. These are new." Gendry lifted a cask, gauging weight. "For everyone here, 10 more hide." Jon Royce approached with news. Deserters captured at a nearby inn claimed Golden Company men fortified Harrenhal's lower baileys, forging siege mangonels. Their leader, Sir Harry Strickland, alive and vowing to deliver a crown to whoever funds their muster. And with him, rumor said, rode a one-eyed kraken, Euron Greyjoy. Tyrion closed his eyes a moment, recalling a black eye staring through salt spray on the walls of Meereen. A gaze mad with thrill. Then the Stormlands may drown if we delay. Gendry hefted hammer. Let's drown him first. Riverrun thrummed with rebuilding. Sansa oversaw engineers strengthening river levees, Missandei drafting charters in triplicate sealed by each house present. Davos directed flotillas to patrol for wildfire barrels set adrift by saboteurs. Arya served as unseen blade, ferreting spies among bakers or minstrels. One night, she followed a traveling bard north of the ford, discovered coded messages in his loot lining. Interrogation revealed a network of Lannister sympathizers using song routes to map dragon patrols. Sansa authorized swift justice. Arya delivered it quietly beneath willows, returning with only a blood-flecked lock of golden hair to place upon the war map, a silent note that one knot was cut. As spring edged toward early summer, the charters of Riverrun stood ready. Lords affixed seals. Trout, rose, falcon, direwolf, dragon, stag, sunburst, even kraken. For Lady Asha Greyjoy arrived bearing peace tokens and grain barges in return for salt rights along the Sunset Sea. Her handshake with Sansa sparked murmurs of improbable alliance. But the wheel turned. Jon returned with Daenerys and a train of ore carts snaking miles. The great hall erupted in cheers. Ghost bounded among tables, chasing roast squirrels tossed by laughing Mormont warriors. For one night, war seemed a shadow far away. Yet courier ravens arrived before dawn. Tyrion had engaged enemy scouts outside Harrenhal and requested reinforcements. Euron's fleet sighted moving upstream along the God's Eye's tributaries, hauling dismantled ships on rolling platforms, intent to set the Great Lake ablaze with wildfire and deny water to dragons. Council convened. Maps unrolled. Options scarce. The God's Eye large as a sea, fed by countless streams. If Euron loosed wildfire across its surface, prevailing winds could carry flame to Riverrun's wooden docks. Even to King's Landing's ruins should sparks ride the Blackwater valleys. Worse, dragons striking wildfire risk scales aflame. Daenerys set jaw. Then we strike, before they set fire. Night attack. Davos queried. Lakes mist thick at dawn. Jon tapped the margins. We lure him out. Dragons feign attack from the east. Vale longbowmen wait on western ridge, flaming arrows tipping his barrels early, before he reaches deep water. Tyrion's raven added detail. Euron transported barrels by barge chained together. A single spark might ignite a chain reaction, but the timing demanded precision. Ignite too late and dragons above might burn. Arya spoke from shadows. I can board the lead barge, sever the chains, scatter his barrels. Jon's face hardened. Too great a risk. Sansa placed quill down, voice calm yet unwavering. She succeeds or we choke on smoke. Let the wolf walk unseen. Daenerys exhaled. Then let Drogon guard from above. Scorning flame until chains break. Plan set. They marched at twilight. Column split. Baratheon and Vale Knights trailed outer roads, unsullied, and Northmen threaded forest paths. Dragons soared at high altitude, silhouettes only patchy shapes beyond evening clouds. On the shore of God's Eye, moonlight silvered black water. Euron's barges loomed like floating fortresses, each piled with clay-sealed casks, crews singing reaver shanties. At the prow of the largest stood Euron, patch glinting, mace in hand, laughing at the night. Arya slid from shadows onto a rear barge. Silent as mist. Needle flashed, two guards dropping soundless. She sidled to a thick hawser binding her barge to next. Poison-tipped dirk sawed through hemp. The rope snapped, current caught the barge, drifting it rearward. Reavers shouted confusion. Above, Drogon descended in silent glide, wings beating only when near silent. His great shape eclipsed stars. Euron raised fist, bellowed for scorpions otherwise hidden. Armored ballistae unfolded, bolts gleaming. But as chains snapped across the flotilla, Arya's work spreading like a plague, the barges sheared apart, gaps opening. From western ridge, Vale archers loosed. Arrows arced, tips wrapped in oil-soaked cloth. The first struck a drifting cask near Euron's flagship. Flame blossomed green. Wind whooshed. A second arrow struck another chain of casks further out. Soon, pinwheels of emerald blossomed each direction, isolating barges in flaming rings. Reavers panicked, some diving though water itself burned. Euron roared, hauled on oar ropes to clear path, but a stray ember ignited pitch at his stern. Green tongues licked rigging. Crew screamed. Euron seized bucket to hurl water, which only fed the flames. His laugh became enraged howl. Drogon banked wide, mouth closed, obeying Daenerys' command to hold flame. Rhaegal, wing mended, circled opposite. Between them, wildfire reflected on scale and membrane like stained glass cathedrals. Jon rode shoreline with Northmen, intercepting fleeing reavers. Ghost lunged from reeds, dragging one man screaming to mud. Davos longboat squads captured others thrashing in shallows. Amid the inferno, a slim figure vaulted railing onto Euron's deck. Arya, gray eyes caught flicker of green behind mask of soot. Euron swung his mace. She ducked, blade flicked, blood sprayed. Yet Patchman pivoted, backhand catching her with iron weight. She staggered but rolled, slicing hamstring. He howled, swung again. Arya leapt, planted boot on rail, flipped over his arc, needle carving a scar down his cheek. Rage contorted his face. He lunged, but the deck tilted. Flames engulfed mast, heat searing. Needle pierced his stomach. She twisted free, kicked him toward spreading fire. Euron stumbled, patch peeling, laughter turning to shriek as green tongues climbed his leathers. He toppled overboard, swallowed by jade light. Arya sprinted for bow, leapt sheer distance to the next barge, rolled, cut final chain. The flotilla disintegrated, wildfire casks sinking before fully catching or spinning into circles that burned themselves out. The lake hissed, steam towering into humid clouds. When dawn broke, God's eye mirrored rosy sky, only dark char still drifting. Arya emerged onto shore dripping water, hair plastered, eyes flat calm. Jon wrapped cloak around her shoulders without word. She leaned into him for one breath, then stepped back, resumed the mask. Tyrion's forces took Harrenhal with minimal resistance. Strickland fled before dawn, leaving forged scorpions half-assembled. Pyromancers surrendered, terrified of dragons. Baratheon smiths melted the chains into horseshoes. Unsullied posted watch on every tower. Ravens carried news across the realm. The Dragon King and Wolf Queen had broken Wildfire's threat. Dragons and deer wolves united. Markets reopened on Maidenpool piers. Highgarden sent grain north. Even Old Town's archmaesters debated sending healing guilds to Winterfell's plague-scarred holdfasts. In Riverrun's Great Hall, the Charter of Riverrun was signed at last beneath banners half-mended from battle. Eon's hand steadied the vellum as he penned his name. Aegon of House Targaryen, first of his name, King of Dragons and Wolves. Daenerys followed, flowing Valyrian script, gleaming. Sansa signed as Regent of the North until new codes ratified. Tyrion, as Hand. Gendry, scarred and grinning, pressed Baratheon's seal. Arya did not sign. She watched from shadow with ghost of a smile. The bells rang, not for war, but for unity forged in flame, not of destruction, but of tempered iron. Later, Jon and Daenerys walked the battlements. Far below, children chased each other with wooden dragon wings and wolf masks. Traders hawked spiced ale, singers tuned lutes. The realm breathed. Jon folded Daenerys into his arms, forehead to hers. "It's only a beginning," he murmured. She smiled, a spark within amethyst depths. "Then let us begin, my king." Overhead, Drogon and Rhaegal soared in widening gyre, twin shadows dancing upon waters now healed, while on the parapet of an ancient castle reborn, a wolf and a dragon watched dawn break across a land that for the first time in a lifetime belonged to no tyrant, no conqueror, but to itself. Wow. Ha. Moonlight washed the battlements of River Run in soft silver, limning every merlin and arrow, slid as if the stones themselves breathed after their long vigil of war. Jon lingered by a crinol, elbows resting on cool sandstone, gaze sweeping across the tumblestone, where lanterns bobbed on fishermen's skiffs, returning with midnight hauls. Below, in the hush between night watches, the castle felt suspended, neither battlefield nor court, simply a place where people slept and dreamed. Daenerys joined him without footfall, a pale cloak wrapped snug toward the thin chill. Her hair, loosed from its braids, fluttered around her shoulders in the whispering wind. She rested forearms beside his, eyes reflecting starlight. "Do you think it will hold?" she asked softly, and Jon knew she meant more than the charter's ink. He tracked a school of silverfish flicking just beneath the water's surface. "I think it must." "Must," she echoed, lips curving faintly. A word we both know too well. Jon straightened. "Will you walk the walls with me?" She nodded, and together they strolled beneath watchlights guttering low. Torches hissed and popped. Beyond, the hush of the river tided back and forth like a giant slow heart. As they rounded the northwest tower, a faint tune drifted up from the courtyard. Strings and pipes weaving a lullaby. Jon recognized it. A northern cradle song, but richer, fused with the minor cadences of Valyria. Missandei's influence on the bards, no doubt. An emblem of everything they tried to forge. Scents, songs, tongues, intermixed. Daenerys' hand found his, fingers clasping. "Tomorrow we ride for King's Landing." He tipped his face skyward. No stars marked that southern direction, only a hush, as if the heavens balked at the name. The city's half a ruin. All the more reason. Rebuilding the capital shows the realm our promises brick and bread, not just parchment. "Man," Jon squeezed her hand. "You fear they'll see another conqueror?" "No," she exhaled. "I fear they'll see a queen distracted by dragons and war councils, letting small folk starve while nobles toast peace." Jon studied her profile, sharp and delicate. "When we rebuilt the wall's crumbled towers, I learned stonework begins not at the highest rampart, but beneath the snowdrifts. Clearing the foundation, we start in the streets." Daenerys' eyes shimmered. "Then we'll start in the streets." 2 mornings later, a convoy of wagons widened the King's Road. Carts laden with riverland oats, Vale rye, and cured fish from White Harbor. Casks of Dornish olives and Tyroshi oranges purchased by Tully coin. Bundles of fresh quarried stone and timber hewn in Storm's End forests. At the columns, head rode Daenerys on a slim desert bay, banners of red and black fluttering. Beside her Jon, on a shaggy northern destrier, direwolf standard intertwined with the 3-headed dragon. Behind them marched unsullied ranks 200 strong, light enough for symbolism, heavy enough to deter pockets of bandits yet lurking. Barrels of grain rolled under the watch of Baratheon men whose black and gold livery still smelled of new dye. Maester Walken rode with the healers, chests of salves and leech kits stacked high, while Missandei and Tyrion shared a covered coach, quills at the ready to draft edicts for sanitation crews and bricklayers. Arya was nowhere to be seen, which meant she was everywhere, somewhere along the forward scouts, or perhaps pacing the rooftops of distant villages before the column even reached them. Sansa remained in River Run, seated on a provisional council with Edmure and Jon Royce to finish ratifications. Gendry, still nursing bruised ribs from the God's Eye skirmish, rode south with Tyrion, but would veer west at Maidenpool on errands for new smithing contracts. The march was slow by design. At each hamlet they passed, triage tents rose and bakers fired makeshift ovens. Daenerys would dismount to kneel among children with bellies swollen from thin harvests, her hand passing bread as gently as a mother's. Jon spent evenings over barrels listening to fishermen, whose nets clogged with corpses months prior. He made note of which streams still ran foul with ash from wildfires, and which needed clear-cutting of debris. Within a fortnight, rumors spread ahead of them. The Dragon Queen and the Wolf King traveled as merchants of hope, not tax collectors. Small folk began stepping from doorways to cheer, shy at first, then fervent as they presented tokens. Patchwork cloaks, carved toys, jars of pickled beans. Near Duskendale the convoy crested a rise, and King's Landing revealed itself. The once proud walls were jagged wounds where dragonflame and wildfire had torn crenel from buttress. The city's charred western quarter remained a blackened crater. Only a latticework of scaffold suggested rebuilding. Yet smoke no longer belched from every street. From this vantage, Jon saw saffron awnings pitched in neat rows, where felt carpets aired, vats of lime-slaked stone, cranes of timber hauled roof beams. Life crept back. They camped outside the shattered Lion Gate, which still bore melted blobs of gilding where the Lannister sigil had liquefied under Drogon's fury. At dawn the gates dragged open with a groan. The convoy entered to muffled stillness. No jeers, no cheers. Only cautious eyes tracking them from broken archways. Jon smelled lime mortar, sea brine, and the faint copper stench of old fire. An impromptu welcoming party waited at the ruined Sept of Baelor. Septon Eustace in plain grey robe, accompanied by a council of guildmasters, masons, chandlers, cobblers, who'd appointed themselves stewards of civic order since the crown's collapse. The Septon's beard had gone white, his face hollow, yet his voice carried dignity. "Your Graces," he intoned, bowing, "King's Landing stands in need. Yet many fear dragons." He looked pointedly at Drogon circling distant thermals. "Convince us those days are gone." Daenerys dismounted, gloveless. "I burned the tyrant's keep," she said, tone steady. "Not the city. I did not come to rule ashes. Help us build, and dragons will cast shade only to cool your ovens." The Mason Guildmaster, a barrel-chested woman missing 2 fingers, crossed arms. "We need coin, stone, and security. Bandits steal our deliveries." Tyrion emerged, ledger in hand. "The crown will fund double wages for 6 months." Storm's End timbers and Vale granite arrive within a moon. Unsullied detachments will guard each caravan. Jon scanned the gathered faces. Hard eyes softened. One tanner wiped tears. Another smith exhaled a shudder. Septon Eustace signaled a silent nod. The guilds parted, beckoning them deeper into the city. Reconstruction began with water. Aqueducts pocked by siege rubble had starved half the districts. Engineers from Old Town, coaxed north by Targaryen gold and Stark grain subsidies, inspected the centuries-old clay pipes. Jon accompanied them through echoing tunnels under Visenya's Hill, torchlight dancing across walls, carved with serpents of lead. Rat corpses and stagnant pools revealed themselves. One misstep sent a lamp-bearer shrieking into shoulder-deep sludge. Jon hauled him out, coughing, then barked orders for immediate ventilation shafts bored to the surface. "Filth breeds more corpses than swords," he told a startled Lysine Master Hydraulican, who nodded fervently and began recalculating pipe gradients. Daenerys oversaw the grain distribution. Each morning at dawn, she and Missandei stood on a dais in the market square outside the gutted remains of the Iron Bank branch. There they registered every household by street, doling tokens redeemable for measured wheat at appointed stalls. A fraction of small folk still eyed her suspiciously, but the sight of unsullied guarding tokens, spears grounded, shields slung, deterred hoarding. By the 3rd week, bakers' ovens glowed on nearly every corner, sourdough tang drifting through alleys for the first time in season. In the evenings, Jon inspected blacksmith rows near Flea Bottom. Gendry had arrived ahead of schedule, already setting up a branch forge for his Storm's End smiths inside what had once been a Lannister armory. Jon found him bare-chested, tattoos black with fresh soot, hammering dented helms into flat sheets to be remade as shovel heads. Sparks fizzed like wildfire motes around his shoulders. "Your Grace," Gendry greeted without ceasing the rhythmic clang. Jon surveyed racks of hastily cooled blades. "Your melting swords." "Dead men's steel," Gendry grunted. "Better to harvest wood than blood." He quenched the glowing metal, hiss echoing. "I owe the city that much, if I wear its crown's bastard tree." Jon laid a hand on his shoulder. "The city will remember." That night, over a cramped meal of onion stew and stale hardtack, Gendry spoke quietly of Arya. How he'd not seen her since River Run, ravens scarce, only scattered reports of a faceless shadow trailing supply caravans to ensure safe passage. Jon reassured him, "If you can't find her, it means she's exactly where she ought to be." Gendry laughed, though worry still lined his eyes. Miles away, the ghost of a girl who'd once worn Arya Stark's face crouched atop a crumbling bell tower, overlooking the Blackwater Bay. Moonlight glinted on broken roof tiles, and the salt tang carried whispers from pirate masts moored just beyond the chain boom. She tracked a narrow skiff slipping through contraband channels, 3 rowers, 1 canted lantern hooded in black. Her contact, a urchin named Stork, had whispered of coin exchanged at midnight. Wildfire remnants, still hidden in Red Keep dungeons, being smuggled to mercenaries scattered across the narrow sea. Arya traced the skiff's trajectory to a partially collapsed wine cellar near the shore. She descended the tower's side, hands finding mortar seams, feet silent upon slime-glazed stone. At street level, she donned a beggar's hood patched with fleas, hobbled along a dark lane until she reached a vantage above the cellar entry. There she saw the rowers unload 2 clay urns swaddled in straw. One slipped, jar tilted. Arya's muscles tensed, anticipating emerald inferno. But a second man steadied it, cursing softly in Bravosi. They shuffled inside. Arya tailed them. Within, the cellar walls wept moisture. Barrels overturned formed a crude altar around which 3 men knelt. At their center, a gaunt-robed figure whose head cowl glowed faint green from chemical stains. A pyromancer. He muttered rites in High Valyrian, pouring powder onto a scrap of parchment. The scent of cinnamon and burnt copper filled the room. Arya crept closer, blade poised. Suddenly the robed man stiffened. "We are watched," he rasped. Before Arya could retreat, torches flared. More men emerged, crossbows drawn with unnerving discipline. She cursed inwardly. Her disguise had been too late. The pyromancer lifted 1 urn. Step, little shadow, and we all burn. Green volatilized in the air above his palm, tiny flames dancing harmlessly. Proof of potency. Arya's mind raced. She tallied crossbow angles, distances to exit, the weight of stone overhead. She saw one slim hope, a rusted chain pulley controlling a half-collapsed beam. If she cut it, the ceiling might drop enough to block the door and douse flame with rubble. Her hand dipped into her sleeve, fingers finding a glass vial of dust shade. She shattered it on the floor, releasing pungent fumes. One crossbowman coughed. Another wavered. Arya pivoted, hurled a dagger to sever the pulley rope. The beam groaned free, crashing between her and the pyromancer. Dust billowed. Shards flying. The urn slipped from his grasp, but before it struck, Arya dove, catching it to her chest. Pain lanced her ribs, yet she rolled, cushioning impact. She sprang up, wove through crumbling arch, and vanished into night with the deadly vessel hugged beneath her cloak. Behind, shouts erupted, crossbows twanged into empty air. The collapse snuffed the lantern. In darkness, chaos reigned. Arya raced across rooftops toward the Red Keep stables, where an unsullied patrol waited. By dawn, the smuggling ring lay in chains, wildfire urns sealed in lead coffers. Word reached Daenerys before breakfast, and the queen quietly quaked with relief. Rebuilding quickened. Small folk, emboldened by steady bread and glimpses of the queen sifting ashes at work sites, formed volunteer brigades. Septons and red priests shared soup lines. Jon committed his personal guard to clearing rubble from orphanages. At night, he told the children northern tales of the rat cook and the snow bear, until laughter echoed in dormitories half-roofed. Daenerys spent hours with the Alchemists' Guild, reformed now under strict oversight, innovating a safer fuel derived from whale oil and volcanic glass dust that might one day power city lanterns without risk. If we can turn the alchemist's fire into light instead of weapon, we rewrite fear. She told Tyrion, who smiled wearily at the enormity of hope. Tyrion, meanwhile, orchestrated a census, the first since before Robert's reign, documenting each household's losses and skills. The process uncovered entire street guilds long ignored. Candle makers of Ferret's Alley, whose lumens were prized by scribes. Kettle-black potters producing heat-proof tiles. Spice cooperatives run by summer islanders widowed in the sack. By giving them voice, Tyrion sowed loyalty deeper than banners. On the 20th day, the first festival in years took shape, the Day of Renewal. Lanterns carved from gourds hung along the street of silk. Jugglers performed for free. Bakers crafted wolf and dragon-shaped loaves, and children dunked tin cups into public fountains flowing again. Jon and Daenerys walked hand in hand among them, disguised in plain cloaks yet recognized widely. A little girl pressed a flower chain into Daenerys' palm, whispering, "Stormbreaker," in awe. A one-armed veteran clasped Jon's elbow and said, "Your father swore no child would starve within sight of Winterfell. I believe you hold the same oath." That night, under archways strung with colored lamps, Jon kissed Daenerys above the city gate, where the dark sea met the star-shot sky. For a heartbeat, the seven kingdoms exhaled. But peace, as ever, breeds envy. In the far west, the broken holdfast of Casterly Rock drew opportunists like flies to honeyed rock. The remaining Lannister pretenders, headed now by Sir Mariella Lannister, daughter of Kevan's late cousin, had retreated into mountain passes, forging alliances with sellswords who refused the River Run Charter. Though Mariella lacked men enough for open war, she possessed gold mines still guarded by automatons of debt. Foremen owed years of back pay, whose only hope lay in continuing to dig for an absent king. From these tunnels she funded sabotage teams, bribery in Essos, and rumors that the Dragon Queen readied to burn every holdfast that criticized her. The first sign reached King's Landing via a mutilated raven, wings painted red. Its scrap of parchment bore a single phrase, "The lion wakes." Tyrion paled. Jon frowned. Daenerys' jaw tightened. A council convened inside the repurposed throne room, still roofless, columns scorched, yet catching bright dawn rays like a sanctuary. "It begins," Tyrion said, pouring wine he did not drink. "Mariella is clever. She'll avoid overt battle, bleed trade, sow discontent until peasants beg for the lion's return. Then we starve her of coin," Daenerys replied. "How?" asked Davos, recently returned with river patrol tallies. "Her mines lie within cliff labyrinths. Land Ziga impossible. Sea approach blocked by iron reefs." Jon considered a map. "Cut her buyers. Gold's worthless if no merchant risks carriage." He tapped ports along the Sunset Sea. Lannisport wearies of war tolls. Offer tariffs waived on grain if they embargo unminted ore. Tyrion smiled faintly. Poetic, using coin to kill coin. Yet Sansa traveled south for the meeting, cautioned, "Starved miners revolt desperate. We must offer them a future other than Mariella's purse." Jon nodded. "A miner's charter, profit-sharing under crown oversight once tunnels reopen." Daenerys agreed. "We will draft terms. But Lannisport must believe we protect, not plunder." Bender. Arya, seated in shadow, spoke only one sentence. "I can reach the rock." Gendry objected instantly. "You nearly burned at God's eye." She shrugged. "I didn't." Her eyes, gray and calm, flicked to Jon. "Let me slip inside. Convince foremen with words if I can, with fear if I must." Jon held her gaze. "No slaughter. Only whispers," she promised. It was decided. Arya would lead a small team of faceless trainees, Bravosi orphans, whom she had mentored at Jon's behest, to infiltrate the rock and begin unraveling Mariella's spy network. In parallel, Daenerys would dispatch an envoy, Missandei and Maester Walken, to negotiate Lannisport's cooperation. Tyrion would pen letters to the Iron Bank, freezing Mariella's offshore ledgers. and Jon would ride north to treat with the Westerlands farmers whose crops fed the miners, offering them northern plows and improved seed stock from Wintertown's botanists. Before they parted, Jon found Arya in the Godswood, planted where the Queen's sept once towered. Gnarled saplings encircled a single weirwood trunk, transplanted from a sacred grove north of the neck. Red leaves whispered under coastal wind. Arya knelt sharpening needle on a whetstone that had once been Shireen Baratheon's toy. Jon approached quietly. She spoke without looking up. "Remember when we hid in the crypts? Ace children?" Jon asked. "Our first battle with the dead." She clarified. "I thought of that night when I stood on Euron's burning deck. Some things never change. Shadows, fear." Jon kneeled opposite her. "You carry more weight than any overfull scabbard. Let some of it down." She flicked needle's tip. "I will, after the rock." He pulled her into an embrace. For a moment, she allowed it. Forehead against his collar. "Keep Gendry's heart warm," he whispered. "He hammers faster when he's worried." Arya smirked into his chest. "I'll send him a riddle each day. What is forged without flame but burns forever? Let him puzzle while he pounds iron." Jon chuckled, releasing her. They stood, brother and sister, as dawn gilded the weirwood's face. Jon's journey west proved arduous. The Riverlands roads, though cleared of brigands, remained rutted. Spring rains turned fields to bog. Yet his arrival in Goldshire village, one of dozens dotting the foothills below Casterly Rock, sparked cautious hope. He met with farmer cooperatives inside a local septee, repurposed as communal granary. There he spoke, not as king but as herdsman's son. He described crop rotation using beans and oats to enrich soil, offered iron plowshares at half cost, and promised that for every stone of grain sold to the crown, 1/4 remained tax-free, feeding their families through next winter. He listened to grievances: wolves raiding chicken coops, levies stealing draft horses, foremen hoarding mine scrip. He took notes, shook calloused hands, left behind seeds tested to thrive in rocky soil. On the second week, Jon escorted a caravan of these farmers surplus north to the city of Case, circumventing Mariella's road tolls. He expected confrontation. Instead, the toll fort stood abandoned, its garrison having been conscripted into Mariella's clandestine militia weeks earlier. In their stead roamed miners clad in patched leathers, hungry and angry. Jon's guards prepared for bloodshed, but Jon rode forward alone, unhelmeted. The miners halted, axes lowered in confusion. Jon addressed them by name. He had memorized lists. Sir Bren, once sworn to Tanner's Guild. Lady Kalia, whose brother died in the collapse of Shaft 12. You have bled enough coin to ghosts in silk. Stand aside, share this grain, and no banner need fall. Silence stretched, broken only by creak of wagon wheels. Then an older miner spat and stepped away. Others followed. By sunset, the convoy rolled unmolested, and Jon ordered sacks of flour left for the miners as token. Mutiny whispered down the cliff passes. Meanwhile, at King's Landing, progress leapt. The aqueduct water flowed clear across the city. New brick kilns fired on the ruins of Maegor's Holdfast, churning terracotta for rooftops. The Street of Sisters reopened, ferrying silk from old Volantis traders, braving the summer sea once more. But Daenerys remained restless. Each success threatened sabotage. Each step forward, a lion's strike in the dark. One dusk, she climbed the skeletal frame of the once throne room's tower, halting where a jagged fragment of the Iron Throne still jutted skyward like a rusted claw. She pressed a palm to its pitted metal. "I wanted you once," she murmured. "Now I see the wound you carved." Drogon glided past, shadow swallowing the square below. With a sigh, Daenerys turned away and descended to join Missandei at the newly founded Harbor College. where midwives trained in antiseptic techniques to curb the fevers that had killed thousands during the war. 6 women graduated that night, each given a satchel of boiled linen and herbs. Daenerys pinned a silver direwolf and dragon brooch to each cloak. As she did, "You heal more than any king's decree." Far north, beyond the wall's broken ramparts, rebuilt by free folk and knights, watch volunteers, Tormund Giant Spain stood with Bran Stark atop a frost-crusted hill. Below, in the valleys of the haunted forest, glimpsed the stirring silhouettes of mammoths and direwolves, and the faint glow of free folk hearths. Bran's eyes glazed white, ravens swirling overhead. When he returned, Tormund grunted. "Bad flappin' goggles?" Bran smiled thinly. "The Weeper has mustered 200 raiders east of Skirling Pass. They plan to strike the gift for grain." Tormund spat. "Bloody fool. The king in the south will feed the gift if we ask." "Help me persuade him," Bran said, voice heavy with realms unseen. Tormund thumped his chest. "We ride when you say, little tree." News of potential raids reached Jon via Raven, and he immediately dispatched letters promising surplus grain shipments north once Lannisport Treaty sealed. He also vowed to raise a mixed patrol of free folk and Stark Rangers to police the gift, symbols of trust across the old border. At Casterly Rock, Arya crept through sea caverns biting into the cliff. Salt spray whipped her face as she clung to barnacled ledges, braving treacherous swells to reach a disused sally port. Within, she navigated twisting passages lit only by slime glow fungus, avoiding patrols. She left gifts. Scrolls pinned with daggers to bunk doors, each bearing lines from the Faceless Men's Code, words promising freedom from servitude. She located Shaft 12 collapse records, copying them to expose mismanagement. She overheard miners plotting strike, planted anonymous instructions for safe assembly. On the 10th night, she reached the old feasting hall. There Mariella dined with sellsword captains beneath tapestries of extinct grandeur. Arya perched unseen in rafters, surveying her aunt-in-law's pride. She studied the defiance, the thinness about Mariella's face, the look of someone feeding off resentment. Arya considered ending the lion's line there with one silent quarrel. Yet she remembered Jon's plea. No slaughter. She waited, listened. Mariella revealed her plan to flood King's Landing grain caravans by poisoning the Roserad wells, then blaming Riverlord's rebels. Arya felt cold bloom inside, but she also heard dissension in the captain's replies, fear of starving miners turning on them, seeds of doubt. That night, Arya slipped into Mariella's private library. On a desk she left a dagger shaped from Castle's own gold ore, its hilt wrapped in miner's script, the blade engraved. "A lion who feeds on dust will choke." Beside it, she placed the copied shaft collapse letters. When Mariella found them at dawn, her scream rattled corridors. Weeks later, as the Crown's grain caravans reached Lannisport without sabotage and miners staged a peaceful sit-down demanding wages from the rightful Crown, not exile pretenders, Mariella realized her power crumbling. She fled west toward Fair Isle with a handful of loyalists, leaving the Rock to lock its own gates. Arya's work done, she boarded a fishing vessel bound for King's Landing, the wind in her hair, a faint smile playing on her lips. By the time Arya returned, the city buzzed with preparations for a grand assembly. An open moot within the still-ruined dragon pit, meant to ratify final articles of the realm's renewal charter. Delegations poured in. Dornish archers with sun and spear cloaks glowing like flame, riverlords in trout brocade, ironborn captains bearing seals of neutrality, free folk chieftains flanked by knights watch black cloaks, and envoys from Quarth Volantis, even Far Lang, eager to negotiate trade routes reopened by pacified seas. On the morning of the moot, Jon donned a simple black doublet, adorned only by a direwolf pin. Daenerys wore deep crimson trimmed in silver, no crown. They entered the dragon pit, hand in hand, through archways draped with banners of every region interwoven into a single tapestry. Direwolf and dragon at the center, ringed by falcon, rose, kraken, spear, stag, griffin, and sunburst. Tyrion addressed the throng from a low dais, voice echoing under stone vaults cracked by dragon talons of old. We gather not to crown a single head, but to acknowledge that none of us alone can bear this realm's weight. The charter before you is a promise that never again will one house's dream be another's nightmare. Then, he unrolled parchment as scribes distributed smaller copies. The charter now included miners' compensation clauses, northern grain stipends for the gift, free folk representation in a newly dubbed Council of Clans, a guild's assembly with veto on city taxation, and a rotating royal court moving between King's Landing, Winterfell Highgarden, once rebuilt, Sunspear and Galltown, ensuring the crown walked the roads it governed. Debate rumbled like thunder but lacked the venom of old. Each concern met with reasoned compromise. Even the Ironborn, once they secured rights to 3 free ports for trade, signed without grumble. By dusk, the last seal pressed wax. A lion rampant, mining foremen's union newly formed, marking the Rock's submission to charter rules. A hush fell. All eyes turned to Jon and Daenerys. Jon stepped forward, not to claim but to thank. He spoke of his father's lessons. A king's first duty is to listen. A sword is last resort, not first. Daenerys followed, voice steady yet passionate, promising to wield dragons as shields, not spears. Then, in a gesture none expected, she called forth the guildmaster Mason, who demanded wages on day 1. Daenerys placed a coronet of hammered copper on her head, proclaiming her mistress of the forge, first smallfolk ever elevated to royal council. The dragon pit erupted in applause. Bells rang across the city. Children released white doves that spiraled into the vaults. That night, atop Aegon's hill where grass now sprouted over blackened earth, Jon built a small cairn of those charred throne shards still scattered. He set atop it a single stone carved with both wolf and dragon. Daenerys stood beside him. "Not an end," she said. "No." He tucked a shard of onyx into the cairn. A milestone. Storm clouds gathered beyond the horizon, yet for the moment a breeze carried sea salt and jasmine up from the gardens below. They watched lights flicker in windows, heard distant music on the air. In the courtyard behind them, Gendry twirled Arya beneath lanterns, her laughter unguarded, his smile boyish. Sansa conferred with Missandei over parchments she hoped to take north, while Bran arrived in his wicker throne, conversed softly with a black-feathered raven perched on his arm. Tormund sampled Dornish red, pronouncing it goat piss sweet to amused free folk. Jon glanced skyward, where Drogon circled with Rhaegal in dusk's lavender glow. He felt the realm's pulse, uneasy, imperfect, but alive. He turned to Daenerys, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Tomorrow we ride for Winterfell. The North must see what we have wrought." "And after Winterfell?" she asked. "After that," he said, voice a promise. "We ride wherever the realm needs, until roads are safe, hearths are warm, and children fear no shadow." She kissed him gently, then let the road be long. Far below, the black water reflected starlight, like scattered coins across a peddler's cloth. Tokens in a world no longer bartered by fear, but by the shared labor of hands that had known war and chosen peace instead. Ghost, lying at Jon's feet, lifted his head to the wind, ears twitching. From distant hills echoed the faint howl of another wolf answering. Starlight wove through his fur, and for the first time since winter's long shadow, the night felt like home. The bells tolled midnight. A new day began. A warm haze settled over King's Landing as dawn dragged molten orange across the bay, and for the first time in remembered years the city greeted morning with the din of craftsmen, rather than the clamor of alarm bells. Jon rose early, habit born of black nights on the wall, and found dragonstone marble tiles beneath his feet, instead of rough stone. Daenerys had insisted their modest apartments in the Crownlands keep the ocean's chill at bay, But he still missed the bite of northern air. He washed in a copper basin, donned a plain linen shirt, and slipped quietly from the chamber so as not to wake her. Duty moved him onward. Peace was a restless beast that demanded feeding. He crossed the palace corridor that overlooked the charcoal shell of the old throne room and descended spiral stairs into a hall where unsullied on rotation, drilled footwork with blunted spears. Their discipline reminded him of the Night's Watch at its best. Obedience to a purpose larger than themselves. But he also saw the faint strain in their eyes. These soldiers had survived Meereen, the long night, the sack, and now they learned to guard grain wagons and schoolhouses. Purpose shifted like sand beneath their sandals. Jon clapped their officer, Grey Worm on the shoulder, murmuring praise in simple Valyrian he had practiced since the march. He saw a flicker of pride cross the warrior's placid face. In the courtyard beyond, Tyrion paced beside a newly erected fountain gushing clear water from the restored aqueduct. Scrolls fluttered in the dwarf's hands, and when he spied Jon he raised them like weapons. "The copper mines at Castamere are filing a grievance," he groaned. "They claim the crown's levy on ore is 2 coppers per stone heavier than the rate promised by charter. They threaten to strike." Jon considered the irony. "Castamere? I thought the rains had washed them away." Tyrion's eye twinkled. "Apparently the rains receded. They want coin to build cofferdams before next flood season." Jon nodded. "Send them engineers and reduce the levy by half for 1 year. We need copper for roof sheeting anyway." Tyrion scribbled, muttering, "Generous Wolf King bleeds treasury, but steals goodwill." Missandei hurried toward them, braids swinging. "A raven from Winterfell. Lady Sansa reports that the river patrols detected 3 longships near the Lonely Light. They flew no colors." Jon's stomach tightened. The Lonely Light lay beyond the Iron Islands, a waypoint for smugglers or raiders. He read Sansa's note. The Free Folk watchtowers sighted ironborn sails trimmed in black. But no further attack. She requested sanction to reinforce garrisons on the Stony Shore. Jon handed the message to Tyrion. "Tell her to recruit within the gift first. Free Folk volunteers want purpose. Let them police the coast. We'll supply them with grain and spear points." Missandei inclined her head and turned to organize the cipher. By the time Jon climbed the Queen's Stair to the terrace gardens, sunlight drenched bougainvillea blossoms crimson, and Daenerys stood barefoot on damp grass, arms outstretched toward Drogon circling high above. She sensed him approach and lowered her arms. "He grows restless," she said. "The city sky is too small." Jon followed her gaze. "Then let him hunt in the King's Wood. Boar herds have exploded." She smiled faintly. "I will send him south at dusk." They shared breakfast on a low stone bench. Soft cheese, olives, figs from Dorne delivered overnight by a raven-guided courier. Between bites, Daenerys unfurled a parchment penned by Septon Eustace. The new orphanage on Rhaenys Hill required additional wards. Its benches overflowed with children displaced by wildfire or plague. Daenerys sighed. "We must repurpose more of the old noble manors." Jon pointed to the map. "House Stokeworth's city mansion lies vacant. Its heirs prefer the countryside. Offer them remission of arrears if they gift us the house." She touched his arm. Small gestures, strengthening bonds more than any treaty. After breakfast, they convened a council of guilds in the marble atrium, erected atop the former Traitors' Walk. Delegates filed in carrying ledgers and measuring rods. The meeting consumed hours. Masons debating arch buttress angles, vintners lobbying for barrel allowances, midwives petitioning for a hospital wing funded by grain tithes. Jon listened, interjecting sparingly, allowing Daenerys' steady confidence and Tyrion's razor logic to navigate. He noted each face. A smith missing 3 fingers, a tanner with acid scars, a sable-haired woman who once baked for the Red Keep, now heading the Bread Guild. These were the realm's new bricks. Just before noon, a page burst through the archway, breathless. A Visenia's Hill courtyard collapsed. "Your graces, workers trapped." Jon and Daenerys exchanged glances, rose in unison. Tyrion pocketed his inkpot and followed. In moments they were mounted on swift steeds, galloping through streets lined with scaffolds. The smell of dust filled the air. mingled with lime and fear. They arrived to find a half-finished archway toppled across a narrow lane, pinning 2 stonemasons beneath. Blood pooled. Cries echoed. Without pause, Jon dismounted, heaved against the fallen block with 3 others until sinews cracked. The stone shifted. Daenerys slipped in, lifting debris from the younger mason's legs. Her slender arms strained, but Drogon's training had hardened her. The crowd watched, stunned. Kings and queens seldom dirtied hands. When the last beam freed the masons, Daenerys ripped her sleeve, bound a bleeding thigh. Jon brushed dust from his brow, called for a litter. He saw their subjects' faces change. Not awe, but recognition. They were mortal too. Moments like this cemented loyalty deeper than banners. That afternoon, Jon inspected the arch's failed keystone. Cheap limestone, rushed workmanship. He summoned the master overseer. No shortcuts, he warned. And because he sensed the man's fear of lost livelihood, Jon assigned him a mentor from the Vale School of Stone Engineering. The same indulgence he had given others. Seeds of trust required soil of forgiveness. 2 days later, a rider arrived from the Westerlands with tidings. Mariella's flight ended at Fair Isle, where she attempted to seize a fleet, but found the harbor closed by order of Lord Farman, now allied with the crown. Cornered, she sailed in a single sloop toward the Sunset Sea. Reports suggested she might seek refuge in the Stepstones' pirates' dens, but storms battered coastlines, her fate uncertain. Jon let out a slow breath. Arya's infiltration, Missandei's negotiations, and his own field diplomacy had defanged the Lion without mass bloodshed. He penned a terse note to Bran. The Lion sleeps. With the Westerland stable, focus shifted north. Bran's Raven revealed the Weeper had recruited not 2 but 600 wildlings, including deserters from Hardhome, and planned raids on granaries near Last Hearth. Daenerys paced as she read the letter. Shall we send dragons? Jon shook his head. Dragons scorch. We need hearts won. I will ride. Daenerys insisted on accompanying him. He hesitated, then agreed. If Rhaegal's wing could bear her, and Drogon's her battalion. Tyrion groaned about absentee rulers, but they trusted the Guild Council to manage the city under Missandei and Davos. Preparations began at once. Within a week, Jon, Daenerys, Ghost, and a cadre of 30 unsullied scouts rode north on swift-hulled river galleys to White Harbor, then pressed along the King's Road. Gendry remained behind to supervise forges. Arya vanished again, whispering only to meet them at the Gift. Sansa, informed by Raven, mobilized supplies and outriders. The North would meet its king and queen on home soil. The journey north revealed the realm's slow healing. Once abandoned farms sprouted wheat. Small villages hosted traveling minstrels singing of dragon-saved harvests. Yet scars lingered. At Maidenpool, they saw graves freshly dug, plague victims from a rogue pox. Daenerys dismounted to console mourners. Her presence lent quiet dignity to grief. Crossing the neck proved arduous when late spring storms turned the causeway to sucking mire. Reeds rose taller than men, and biting flies swarmed. Cranagmen guided them in reed boats, singing mournful tunes. Jon noted their tales of ghost lights in the bog. Spies or spirits? He stored the intelligence. They reached Winterfell under cold drizzle. The old castle's new stone gleamed where patches replaced battle scars. Sansa awaited at the gatehouse beneath a direwolf-embroidered canopy, her auburn hair streaked with silver thread headband. Bran sat near, eyes distant yet warm. The gates swung wide, and northern banners fluttered in greeting. That night, banners of all houses still standing flew in the great hall. Jon addressed them, voice carrying through rafter shadow. The realm no longer survives by fear of winter alone. We endure by binding hearth to hearth. He announced the Free Folk Patrol Plan. Free folk to guard the coast, paid in trade goods, overseen by joint councils. Murmurs rose. Glover grimaced. But Lady Lyanna Mormont pounded fist to table. If a wolf and dragon can share throne, she barked, a crow and wildling can share boat. Cheers followed. Daenerys spoke, promising the North a levy exemption for 5 years, to let fields recover from conscription losses. She unveiled a gift, Dragon-fired glass panes to roof the broken greenhouse. Winterfell's famed glass gardens would grow citrus again. The hall gasped. Even stoic northern lords loved bright fruit in dark months. At feasts, Brand's voice halted laughter. The past stirs. His eyes glazed, whites flickering. He spoke in monotone. Shadows walk the old stones. Blood of the first men awakens stone giants in the lake. The hall stilled. Maester Walken frowned. Old legends whispered of petrified colossi buried near the ruins of old stones, a long-abandoned castle by the Trident. Jon recognized Bronn's visions rarely erred. He exchanged glance with Daenerys. Another threat? Or prophecy? Sansa quelled panic deftly. We'll investigate, one story at a time. The feast resumed, though subdued. Days later, they marched east toward the gift. Snow surrounded them by the time they reached Last Hearth's outskirts. Fires burned in abandoned granaries. Weeper's raiders had struck. Strewn bodies marked their path. Wildlings and Northmen both, cut by crude axes, throats slashed. Jon's jaw tightened. Daenerys touched his arm, eyes stormy. They tracked prints through dense pine until they reached a ravine shrouded in fog. Rhaegal circled above, Drogon farther afield. Jon dismounted, ghost at heel. He motioned silence. Unsullied fanned out. A horn blast echoed. Free folk call. Tormund emerged, beard rimed with frost. They're holed up in the ravine caves, he rumbled. We count 300 left. Jon nodded. Let me speak to them. Daenerys started to argue but paused. Trust had to walk. Jon approached the cave mouth unarmed. A snowflake drifted onto his lash. Melted. From the shadow came the Weeper. Ragged furs. Eyes runny from old frostbite. Crow King comes, he sneered. You wear lion's gold now? Jon met his gaze. No gold. Bread. Feels. He tossed a loaf across the snow. It landed near the Weeper's boots. The raider glanced at his starving followers. Gaunt women clutching infants, boys half-clad. He snarled. Bread costs oath. Jon stepped closer. My oath. Grain for peace. Join patrols. Guard coast. Earn share. He spread arms. Or keep raiding and watch dragons darken the sky. As if summoned, Drogon roared high above, silhouette immense. The Weeper flinched. After a beat he spat, kicked the loaf toward one of the women, who scrambled for it. We patrol, he muttered. But blades stay sharp. Jon inclined head. Then sharpen them for our enemies, not our children. Integration began by dusk. Unsullied quartermasters distributed furs and salted pork to the Weeper's people. Free folk scouts paired with knights watched veterans. Tormund clapped the Weeper on the back so hard he stumbled. Peace tasted of smoke and suspicion, but it tasted. Daenerys, observing, whispered to Jon that night under a canvas lean-to. You make peace look simple. He kissed her brow. Simple doesn't mean easy. Tomorrow they may fight. But tonight we rest. 2 weeks later, news reached them of strange tremors near Old Stones. Villagers fled, claiming stone giants rose from the ground at moonrise. Jon, Daenerys, Bran, Arya, and a small retinue rode south to investigate. They reached Old Stones as dusk-colored ruin gold. The ancient castle sat crumbling on a hill, overlooking the river Sepia with silt. Tents ringed the base, frightened small folk. Jon ascended the hill, boots crunching through dead leaves. Bran followed in his wicker chair carried by Hodor's cousin. The ground vibrated like a slumbering beast. Then, before their eyes, the battered effigy of a First Men warrior embedded in the courtyard crack. From within burst vines, glowing with ghostly light, writhing like veins. Stone groaned. The statue leaned and rose, joints grinding. A face long eroded, now shone with runes pulsing blue. Daenerys reached for Jon's sleeve. Children of the forest magic. Bran's pupils turned pale. An age-old guardian, he murmured, voice layered. Awakened by imbalance. The land feels our fires and walls. Arya stepped forward, hand on needle. How do we put it back to sleep? Before answer came, the The stone giant lumbered toward them. Unsullied readied spears. Drogon swept overhead but held flame. Jon raised hand. He remembered the language of the children taught briefly by Leaf in winter's dark. He uttered halting words. We guard. We mend. The runes flickered. The giant halted, head tilting like mountain curious of ant. Bran spoke next, seamless in ancient tongue. The runes dimmed to gentle glow. Slowly, the giant knelt, fist thudding earth, then crumbled into inert stone once more. Vines retreated into cracks. Silence reclaimed the ruin. Bran exhaled. They awaken where ancient oaths fracture. We must keep balance. Jon met his brother's gaze. Then we build not just for men, but for the land. Daenerys placed her palm on the cooling stone, whispering a pledge. To replant groves, restrict mining ravage, let rivers run clean. The earth seemed to settle. By the time they returned to King's Landing, summer warmed the walls, ivy creeping across scaffolds. The orphanage stood complete, laughter echoing through courtyards scented with citrus. Castamir's copper miners sent word of first tribute under new fair levy. Boats from Pike docked with barrels of pickled herring. Trade, not terror. In the rebuilt Great Square, merchants from Yeti displayed silk in hues unheard of in Westeros. It appeared for once, the wheel truly slowed. That night, on a balcony overlooking torchlit streets, Jon and Daenerys watched people dance around midsummer bonfires. Arya leaned against the balustrade, flicking a coin. Valar Morghulis one side, Valar Dohaeris the other. Gendry approached with 2 flagons of ale, offered one to her. She sipped, nodded approval, returned coin to pocket, and slipped her free hand into his. Sansa joined dressed in northern blue trimmed gold. Letters from Old Town. She reported to Jon and Daenerys. The Archmaesters propose a school of governance to educate sons and daughters of all houses in healing, law, and trade. Open by royal decree. Jon smiled. Send them funding and ask they admit commoners first. Sansa arched brow. Commoners before lords? Daenerys touched her arm. A realm that teaches the lowly teaches the lofty to listen. Bran rolled forward. A raven perched upon his chair. The winds of winter sleep, he intoned. But his voice warmed. Yet seasons turn. Watchers must remain. Jon bowed his head. And we will watch. Below, bells tolled a joyous peal, their notes drifting like feathers. Ghost sprawled near the door, lifted eyes. Then settled again, content. And far beyond, where the horizon kissed sea, a lone sail slipped west, carrying Mariella into exile. Storm clouds blocked the setting sun, but a shaft of tempered light pierced through, gilding the waves ahead. Even exile held possibility. In every direction, paths unspooled, north to white forests, south to sun-kissed deserts, east across shadowed seas, west over sunset waters. The realm no longer knelt beneath a single crown. It stood unsteady yet upright, on the shoulders of dragons and wolves, of smiths and orphans, of wildlings and kneeling lords. On broken stone remade and songs rewritten. Jon turned to Daenerys, took her hand. Shall we walk? He asked, meaning not just the balcony but the long road beyond. She intertwined her fingers with his. Always. They stepped into the lantern light. Hearts steady amid uncertain dawn. And behind them the tower bells kept ringing. Bright and human, fragile and brave, proclaiming to any still listening that darkness could end, and that after every long night, there came the work of living. Okay. Torchlight rippled along the riparian walls of the Whispers as Jon guided his horse down the twilight road that traced the tumbling waters of the Mander. The riverlands, flush with midsummer bloom, appeared peaceful enough. Yet rumors had fluttered on raven wings all week. Bandit companies from the Shield Islands slipping into the Reach, striking at caravans that bore copper and grain bound for King's Landing. Where war and dragons had once galloped, newfound prosperity lured those who preferred plunder to honest trade. Daenerys rode beside him, Rhaegal circling high above in a lazy spiral, all emerald shadow and beating sailcloth wings. She wore no regal mantle tonight, only a rough-spun riding cloak the color of storm clouds. Her braid, silver shot through with sun-bleached gold, was coiled tight against the wind. Each dawn she seemed more part of Westeros, less the exile who had stepped barefoot from the fire. Yet Jon sensed restlessness in her fragile smiles. A queen forged for crisis, now learning to craft in calm. To their rear clopped a retinue of 20 Night's Watch veterans paired with free folk rangers, an experiment Jon insisted upon. He hoped Southern eyes would see such odd company, and accept that no border of ice or prejudice stood between them any longer. Among those riders Tormund Giantsbane told raucous jests, prompting easy laughter from a woman built like a granite pillar who hailed from Skagos. Jon's heart warmed at the sound. Laughter carried farther than steel. As dusk sank into cobalt, they made camp beneath an overhang, where willow branches curtained a clear pool. The night smelled of water, mint, and peat smoke. Stew simmered in kettles, wood smoke curling skyward to meet a quarter moon. Jon and Daenerys shared a log, passing a canteen of sweet cider pressed from early apples of the fallow fields. It tasted of crisp promises. He studied her face in the fire glow. A hardness earned, yes, but softer edges returning. Cheeks flushed from ride, color washing the pallor left by war. "You seem lighter," he ventured. "Do I?" Her eyes reflected flame. "Perhaps I spent so long breathing war that I never noticed peace had its own air." Jon smiled. "Careful. Stay in peace too long and you'll grow bored of me." She nudged his boot with hers. "You start wars just by brooding. I'll never lack excitement." They shared a comfortable silence until footsteps approached. An older watchman named Malor raised a hand. "Your Graces," rider approaching from upstream. "Comes hard and alone." Jon straightened. "Sigil?" "No banner," Malor said. "But the horse is lathered." Jon rose, Daenerys a half-pace behind. Moments later, a lank figure in torn leathers emerged between torchlit trunks, wheezing whine. It was a girl, perhaps 15, with cropped ash-blonde hair and half-healed cuts across her cheeks. Fear widened her eyes as she sighted Rhaegal silhouetted against the moon, yet desperation drove her forward. "Bandits!" she gasped. "Sacked Green Apple, took prisoners." She swayed. Jon reached her as her knees buckled, catching her weight easily. Daenerys murmured for water, pressing the skin to the girl's lips. She coughed, drank. "How many?" Jon asked gently. "Maybe 40. Tears welled. They wore Kraken sigils, black sails. Took my father." Jon's jaw clenched. Ironborn renegades again, though the crown had treaties with Asha Greyjoy. These must be pirates left adrift after Euron's fall. He lifted the girl's chin. "We'll bring them back," he swore. Turning, he called for Tormund and Ser Jorah, recently arrived from Bear Island, to act as liaison between northern lords and unsullied detachments. Jon spoke quick strategy. Scouts to find the raiders, Daenerys in reserve with Rhaegal, no wildfire, minimal blood. He saw the flash of affection in her eyes. He always tried mercy first. An hour later, they rode by moonlight, hooves muffled with burlap dada. Ghosts slipped ahead, white phantom weaving between reeds. The trail led to a clearing near an abandoned sept, where flickering torches ringed wagons and tethered horses. Jon took position in tall rye. Through shadows he counted 36 men. A handful of women captives bound to a cart, and a towering brute brandishing a rust-pocked great axe. Kraken patches sewn crooked on jerkins. A charcoal brazier spat sparks near barrels stamped with the sigil of House Fossaway, Green Apple's cider works. Jon signaled. Tormund's free folk archers knocked arrows. Watchmen readied crossbows. Jorah and 2 unsullied edged sideways to cut horses free. When all stood poised, Jon stepped clear of the rye. Cloak cast back to reveal the direwolf dragon sigil. Steel sang as he drew long claw. "Lay down arms," he called, voice cold as weirwood bark. Torches wavered. Pirates pivoted, shock-twisting features. One spat. "The king who says he's a dragon? Thought you wore feathers now." Jon advanced 3 measured steps. Last chance. The brute laughed, hefting gray tax. Gold buys our loyalty, not threats. A thunderous roar tore the sky. Rhaegal descended like emerald tempest, landing behind Jon with concussive force. Wind blast toppled a torch, sparks spraying. Pirates froze. The brute swallowed, but pride bound him. He charged. Jon sidestepped, sword flickering in moonlight. One stroke severed axe haft, another sliced hamstring. Brute collapsed, roaring pain. Arrows hissed. Free folk shafts pinning 2 more raiders. Crossbows thumped. The field erupted in chaos that ended near as soon as it began. Survivors flung weapons, dropping to knees. Jorah and Unsullied freed captives, soothing them. When silence settled, Tormund herded prisoners to the Sept stairs. Jon addressed them. You can return to your islands in chains, or you can work the roads you scarred, repairing mills, dredging rivers. Serve a year and earn freedom. Fear warred with relief in their eyes. All chose work. Jon returned to camp near dawn. The girl who'd begged rescue, named Halia, slept under Maester Wolkin's care. Daenerys sat near, feeding logs to the fire. He joined her, fatigue lining every limb yet heart eased. She leaned into him. Not one captive killed. One day the realm will forget pirates. He kissed her hair. Or remember that we fight them together. In the months that followed, the crown's influence seeped where swords never reached. Piracy along the Sunset Sea plummeted as coastal watchtowers, manned jointly by ironborn traders and reach fisherfolk, lit beacon chains at first sight of black sails. Castamere miners formed profit cooperatives, shipping copper to King's Landing foundries, run by Stormlanders and Dornish metallurgists. Asha Greyjoy's envoys delivered whale oil for the alchemists' safer lantern fuel, earning trade concessions and silencing her more restive captains. Sansa's northern grain fleets, escorted by free folk sailors, glided up the Blackwater daily. Her letters to Jon brimmed with account ledgers and sly wit. Tales of Lady Lyanna Mormont browbeating Karstark traders into fair pricing, of Bran predicting late frosts and saving barley harvests. Winterfell thrived like no age since Eddard's youth. Yet further east, across the narrow sea, change brewed. In Volantis, the Triarchs had fallen to a populist council, who eyed Westeros' rising stability with both admiration and unease. Their merchants whispered of a new world-spanning trade league anchored by the Crown lands, wealth that could eclipse the old Bloods ports. Among the council rose a man named Narco Buonaros, famed orator and rumored sorcerer, who preached that dragons would inevitably tighten claws around Essos. Cut the talons now, he urged, while the beast yet slumbers. One crisp dawn, a sleek Volantine cutter slipped into Blackwater Bay under flag of truce. Its envoy, Triarch-appointed merchant Rhaela Vassar, brought gilded gifts, silks, ivory, spice. Daenerys welcomed her in the refurbished small hall, its high windows catching sunrise. Rhaela bowed gracefully, praising the queen's pursuits, but Daenerys noted tension beneath courtesy. Rhaela expressed concern over tariffs recently levied on spice sales entering King's Landing, a modest duty meant to bolster harbor repairs. She requested exemption for Volantine vessels, citing ancient pacts with Targaryens of old. Tyrion, leaning on a cedar cane, countered that ancient pacts also permitted Valyrian dragonlords to harvest slaves, agreements long revoked. Rhaela's composure cracked for an instant. Then she unveiled her true gambit. The freehold dead, yet dragons return. Across the summer sea, kingdoms watch. They wonder. After bandits and lions, whom will the dragons tame next? Remove your harbor duties and sign exclusive trade bonds, and Volantis will hail your realm as equal, not master. Translation: drop tariffs or face a coalition. Daenerys' eyes frosted. Equal realms share burdens. Rhaela demurred. The meeting ended politely, but Tyrion's brow furrowed. That evening, council convened in the Tower of the Hand. Tyrion laid out maps showing Volantis' most vital shipping lanes. Summer Sea Straits, Basilisk Isles Run, Jade Gates. Davos explained how narrow-hulled warships from Driftmark could blockade those arteries if needed. Jon listened, arms folded. Daenerys mulled. "We do not seek war," Jon replied, "but must answer threat." Sansa, visiting for harvest treaties, spoke up. "Pressure them with principle. Volantis profits from slavery still." Missandei nodded vigorously. "Use trade courts established in the charter. Ban slave-produced goods. Allies will side with us." The idea sparked. Tyrion began drafting an edict. Any cargo proven slave harvested would pay triple tariff, or be denied birth. Weeks later, the edict reached Volantis. Narco Buenaros thundered in the Flame Gate Square, claiming the Westerosi crown waged economic war. He rallied support among slaveholding cities. Lys, Nugais, Tolos. Whispers spoke of a confederation building fleets. Back in King's Landing, shipyards thrummed day and night. Dockworkers, freedmen from Astapor, fishermen from the Trident, hammered hulls under guidance from Valerion shipwrights. High above, Drogon and Rhaegal soared along the coast, patrols of living deterrents. But Jon knew dragons alone could not guard every wave. He summoned Lord Davos and Asha Greyjoy to map naval patrol routes. Asha, smelling opportunity, proposed a Western war fleet composed of ironborn captains bound by charter oath. She volunteered to command under royal banner in exchange for crown-funded dock repairs at Lordsport. Daenerys accepted, though she warned, "Break oath and dragons come." Asha grinned. Chains break easier than oaths sworn by those who choose them. As hulls slipped down greased beams into Blackwater Bay, Jon oversaw training of Marines, unsullied spear phalanxes adapted to tight decks. Arya returned from a brief errand in Bravos with a pouch of Bravosi chits and a promise. The Iron Bank would neither fund nor favor Buenaros War unless the Westerosi crown defaulted, which it would not. She also brought stories of red priests railing against dragons, a familiar tune that set Daenerys's jaw. Throughout preparations, life in the capital continued its relentless hum. The orphanage overflowed. Missandei petitioned for a second home atop Visenya's hill. Jon and Daenerys toured smallfolk districts weekly, unveiling clean wells, thatched roof initiatives, and a baker's guild school for war widows. With each ribbon cut, affection for the dual monarchy deepened. One starless night, Bran Ward dreamed across the narrow sea. He awoke with visions of slave ships massing, sails black as the moonless tide. He sent ravens south and east. The next morning Jon convened commanders. "War may find us yet," he said softly. They sailed 2 months later. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Davos, Asha, and a fleet of 63 ships, ironborn longships converted for ramming, reached galleons laden with scorpions, a half-dozen new dragon prows forged from Castamere copper, their figureheads stylized deerwolves and dragons snarling. Drogon and Rhaegal shadowed overhead. They encountered the Volantine allied armada at Slaver's Bay mouth. Over 100 vessels, largest a tri-tiered Drummond dubbed the Tyrant's Providence, guns bristling. Buenaros himself commanded from her gilded forecastle. The two fleets eyed each other across chop-tossed green water, dolphins leaping between lines. Parley commenced. Tyrion and Missandei rode under white flag to Providence, returned with Buenaros' ultimatum: resigned slave goods embargo and dragon tariffs, grant Volantis exclusive harbor quarter, and pay reparations for economic aggression, or face blockade and potential invasion. Daenerys' answer was delivered not in words but in steel. The fleets formed into crescents, scorpion arms ratcheting. Yet before first arrow flew, Jon signaled. A small launch pushed from their flagship. On it stood the ash-blonde girl Halia, now clothed in green silk, with the rescued Green Apple townsfolk. They held loaves of bread. Jon's message boomed by horn. "This is what we defend. Not coin, but people." Tense silence roiled. On Providence's deck, Buenaros barked, scoffed. But murmurs rippled among his captains, many of whom hailed from families touched by dragonfire in past wars, and had little stomach for a crusade now that they saw dragons above glimmering like living stars. Daenerys rose on Drogon's back, speaking Valyrian amplified by Rhaegal's roar taunt. "Send your slaves ashore and you may depart in peace. Fight and fire cleanses." She gestured. Dragonstone marines rolled crates to railings, prying lids to reveal thousands of iron manacles, melted and reforged into arrowheads and nails, symbols of chains broken. A hush, then the unexpected. From 3 Lyseni warships, white flags lifted. Their helmsmen turned, oars shipping. Next, a new Giscari cutter swung out. Within quarter hour, over a dozen ships broke line, crews rebelling. Buonarosa's roars carried. He ordered ballistas to fire on deserters. Chains flicked. Spindly javelins shredded Lyseni sailcloth. Screams pierced gull squawk air. Daenerys' fury ignited. Drogon dove, a thunderbolt of black scale and crimson flame. Jon on Rhaegal followed. Yet he shouted through speaking horn, "Aim for masts, not men!" Dragons obeyed. Jets of fire cut rigging, melted crow's nests, dropping yards in tangled heaps that crushed decks without incinerating hulls. The Westerosi fleet advanced behind their arcs, launching grapples against crippled Drommons, unsullied and iron-born storming rails. On Providence, Buonaro swung a glass knife at sailors mutinying. He slew 2 before an iron-born axe lodged in his shoulder. He staggered, bleeding, stumbled to the rail, glaring skyward. Daenerys hovered above. Their gazes locked, and in that moment Buonaro saw not the conqueror of Slaver's Bay, but the mother who freed Meereen's pits. He spat blood. "You broke the world," Daenerys answered in a voice low as distant thunder. "I mend it." Drogon's tail lashed. A gust of wind toppled Buonaros overboard. He plunged into churning sea and vanished beneath black water. The battle ended less an hour after it began. 20 enemy vessels surrendered, 12 burned to waterline. The rest fled for Lys or sunk under scorpion bolts. Westerosi losses. 2 longships shattered, others scarred. Asha Greyjoy's flagship, the Seawolf, weathered 4 ram strikes before grappling Providence and raising dire wolf dragon banner atop its ruined forecastle. Daenerys ordered every slave aboard freed. Volunteers rowed them to a nearby island where healers waited. Some chose to return home under charter protection. Others pledged service to the crown. Jon assigned Lyseni rebel captains safe passage east in exchange for testimony against slave markets. When the fleet sailed back across the summer sea, banners snapped crisp under bright wind. The realm's first test abroad had ended in deterrence, not devastation. Fire wielded with precision, tempered by mercy. They returned to King's Landing to throngs cheering on quays. Small folk waving blue banners, color of the sea they'd defended. Orphans threw petals from rooftop gardens. Jon lifted Daenerys from saddle, spinning her once before setting her down in laughter rare and free. That autumn, the council petitioned to erase harbor tariffs entirely for cities certified slave-free, incentivizing human commerce. Volantis, chagrined and impoverished, abolished shadow markets within 2 years, seeking partnership. Winter's first snows dusted rooftops on the 4th anniversary of Long Night's fall. Snow in King's Landing, almost unheard of. Stunned children who had never seen flakes. Jon and Daenerys walked amid swirling white, cloaks mingling. They paused on the new Bridge of Songs, spanning the Blackwater, its copper railings etched with verses in common, Valyrian, Rhoynar, and the Old Tongue. The bridge's central arch bore twin sculptures, a dire wolf howling and a dragon unfurling wings, cast from melted weapons surrendered by the realm. Beneath those figures, they embraced. Breath fogged between them, mingling with snowflakes. Jon rested gloved hands upon her belly. Recently, Maester Wolkan had confirmed a child quickening within. Daenerys' eyes shimmered. In that fragile hush, Jon felt time shove aside winter's bite, promising spring. From the heights of Aegon's Hill, bells tolled a gentle chime. Not alarm nor victory, but simple acknowledgement of a realm still breathing. Bran in Winterfell's Godswood heard them through ravens. Sansa in the Solar smiled. Arya, listening from a Braavosi rooftop, paused then sheathed needle. Across green fields, over gray waves, under star-pocked skies, the wheel, if not shattered, spun less cruelly, its spokes oiled by the sweat of common hands, and guarded not by fear, but by watchful hearts. And in the falling snow, a wolf and a dragon kindled warmth enough to outshine winter's ghost, certain that whatever trials tomorrow conjured, they would answer together, for that was the compact quietly forged from ridge to shore, from crypt to sky. That unity, like flame tempered by frost, could endure the longest night and greet each dawn with steadfast eyes fixed on horizons not yet imagined.